Thank you. Let's have a good time.
Taken for a trip on a new dimension ship. Taken for a ride over to the other side. Discovered that time's been forgotten like a song that they never played on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. I can't relate to where I am. People just don't give a damn. I'll find a way, make a break, figure out what it takes while traveling at the speed of light. Changes come, they affect their sight. Now it's been 7 years, almost there. The planet nears, taken for a trip on a new dimension ship. Taken for a ride over to the other side. Discovered that time's been forgotten like a song that they never played on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. There's people that I recognize. They've come here to it out disguise, searching for a better home, place where we're not all alone. Taken for a trip on a new dimension ship. Taken for a ride over to the other side. Discovered that time's been forgotten like a song that they never played on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Doug Wright. Thank you. Apparently, I was muted. But I said, Happy Memorial Day to all of you out there. Today is Monday, May 25th, 2026. And thanks everyone for being here. And that was a beautiful song by Mr. Doug Rice. And I thought it was a wonderful way to start the show today. I was reminded of that song earlier today by a friend, and I thought it was an appropriate way to start the show today and remind us of what's important here. Um, you saw I had the beautiful picture of Abby and Libby up, and with everything that's going on in this community and in the world, and in this case, I thought it was appropriate to remind you all of why we're actually here. And and I believe why Mr. Doug Rice was here, and that's those two lovely, innocent girls that you just saw in the introduction. And I thought today that what really needs to be said is that they are truly the only innocent people here. Those are the only two individuals who didn't make any mistakes, who haven't done any wrong. All of us, each in our own way, has made mistakes. We've all done things that are wrong. And it's part of what comes as being human and being adults. And and I think that as time has passed, we've forgotten that, and we've forgotten that those two little girls, Abby and Libby, they didn't do anything wrong. They're truly innocent. They didn't make any mistakes. They didn't hurt anybody. They didn't bring this on themselves. And they didn't turn this into a battle of egos, um, a, a place to use for ego fulfillment, projection, and rage baiting. They are the true victims here, and what this entire case is all about. And as I've said so many times before, unfortunately, Richard Allen and his family has been brought all into this. And so, therefore, as we are sitting here on Memorial Day discussing the wrongful conviction of a veteran and remembering the sacrifices made by veterans throughout history, we're here discussing the appeal of Richard Allen and the railroading and wrongful conviction and all of the crimes committed by everyone involved, meaning the law enforcement, the prosecutors, and the judge in this case, and potentially some witnesses. Um, and I think we really need to hit the reset button on this and remember of that. Remember that. Remember the famous biblical quote, "Let he who is without fault or sin cast the first stone." And I've said before, I wonder what those kids would think. Would they want this? Would they want all that has transpired in the wake of their brutal, disgusting murders? And I think it's very clear that the answer to that would be no. Remember, they would be young adults now, and I'm sure that they would be disgusted, sickened, and ashamed of what has happened in the so-called pursuit of justice for their killings. And I think today would be a good day to take notice of that and to think and to move forward with at in the forefront of our thoughts the concept of, does every action that I take reflect honorably upon the victims here? What would each of these young ladies, should they still be alive, think about the very next thing that I do? And that goes for every creator out here. That goes for every official out here, every family member, and every chatter and viewer and person following this case. It's really heartbreaking when you zoom out and take a look at this entire community, even going back to the beginning, and you think about the individuals who were the first to cover this case. You know, I need you guys to put your thinking caps on and think clearly. Think back to 2018, 2019, 2020, in the years in the lead up to Richard Allen's arrest. Think of all of the YouTubers out here who utterly disgraced the memories of Abby and Libby with all of their antics and behavior, the death threats, the lies, the bullying, the smearing, the taunting, the conspiratorializing. Ultimately, we know that a group of individuals took the lives of these young ladies. We know that another group of individuals has assisted in covering up the murders of these young ladies. And we know that suddenly in 2022 or so, the state actors decided they were going to target Richard Allen, frame him, arrest him, attempt to have him plead guilty to these crimes, and bury this case forever. And unfortunately, their plan did not succeed, so they were forced to bring this to trial, which means they're now in a difficult situation and that they're forced to deal with the aftermath of the trial, which is the public criticism, the potential appellate overturning of this conviction, potential post-conviction relief efforts, and potential Supreme Court actions. So we find ourselves in the middle of a road that started in February of 2017 and still likely has years left to go for that road to be traveled. And everyone here should be seeking to shine light into this dark corner of the country and this dark corner into the history of this portion of the country. To shine this light in order for that light to penetrate the darkest recesses of the state of Indiana, the entire Midwest, the criminal networks that are operating, trafficking guns, children, drugs, CSAM, and any number of criminal enterprises. And I truly believe that these girls here are the victims of a web of criminal activity that they had nothing to do with, that continues to this day, and that is desperately seeking to continue to operate in the shadows outside of the realm of accountability. And for us to not continue to try to push for this transparency, the uncovering of a multitude of crimes, and basic honor, dignity, and respect for the victims, we're facing very difficult terrain in this journey that's still left. And I think if you want to see the most horrible truth of this, you start with taking a look at the crime scene. And after you take a look at the crime scene and stare into the abyss and the reality of what happened to these girls, then you back off and you look at the darkness of all that followed, of all that all of you out there question, all that came from law enforcement, all that came from the locals, all that came from the families, and all that came from this effort to prosecute Richard Allen. And I think it's an overwhelming sense of darkness or evil, which this crime sits squarely in the center of. And I've been hammering this case because I am absolutely convinced that it matters, that keeping the word out here matters, that continually putting this ugly truth in your face matters. And I would ask you to do the same. If we just drop it and let it go away, then it's that much easier for their ends to be achieved. And conversely, if we take it and put it in your faces constantly, consistently, day in, day out, it's that much harder for them to continue to get away with burying the truth, the ugly truth of this case. And I think that's the brutal truth. That's the ugly truth. That's the bitter truth of what we're dealing with here. So today, we're going to again take a look at the documentation of the appellate process here for Richard Allen. In the past several episodes, we've gone meticulously through every point of this appeal. And finally, we're at the end of that, where um, we get to sort of zoom out and look at the big picture. Because I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in the details. So today we're going to complete our series on the appeal of Richard Allen by taking a look at the statements of the case, the statements of the issues, and the defense and the state's arguments, so that we can have a broader understanding of the summary. I would call this a summary of the appeal of Richard Allen. And hopefully you'll step away from this today with a greater understanding of the overall takeaway for the appeal of Richard Allen, where we are now, and where the facts sit as we wait for the official process to play out, which realize that this is going to go into the end of the year at a minimum. So we're not even at the halfway point of the year, so we still have another half a year to go to watch this continue to play out. And that's just this particular point in the process. I guarantee that there will be more years in this process. So we'll find out what that's about. But that's the objective of tonight's show. So if you guys are new here, please do me a favor after hitting the thumbs up. Leave your comments down below. We're always happy to hear from your ideas and share your ideas and to discuss. And likewise, if you're a regular viewer here in the chat, please enjoy yourselves. Please discuss amongst yourselves. I'm going to be buried in the paperwork here, so I'm going to be a little distracted at the moment, but feel free to discuss, to share. And as I've asked you before, go out and make a noise about this. We've got, like I said, 6 months to go. Make a noise about this in all of your social networks. Share this and share your ideas on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube. Do what you can. Not everybody can do the same thing, but everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses, their own talents, their own propensities. So in whatever way you can do whatever you do, keep this in mind and spread the word. Anyhow, for those of you who are new here or new to the case, this single episode should be a good way for you to quickly wrap your mind around what's going on with the appeal in the Delphi murders. So without further ado, we'll get into it and we'll get the show on the road. Now, keep in mind, we're going to be hearing from the defense perspective, and we're going to be hearing from the prosecution's perspective. And I leave it up to you to weigh the weight of the strengths of these particular facts and arguments. Because I'm telling you, spoiler alert, my overall takeaway after, thoroughly reviewing all three of these filings, which is all we got, is that there's no comparison. The defense attorneys have laid out an absolutely compelling and convincing argument with facts backed up by receipts, many of which we've shown you repeatedly. And the state really failed to produce any convincing counter argument against the concerns or the issues that the appellate attorneys have raised. And so, although I'll leave that for you to judge for yourself, clearly I'm of the opinion that it's very obvious that the appellate attorneys have raised a convincing argument and proven their point. Not only have they proven their point on paper with facts, but I think they've proven their point to the public, which is why you're seeing a large change in the public sentiment. People who had before no real clear opinion one way or the other can clearly see the relative strengths of the arguments here. And there are some people who even assumed that the cops in the state was telling the truth, and they kind of believed. And I think there are people who had believed Richard Allen was guilty that have now been convinced that he's not, or at a bare minimum, that he was framed and railroaded. And so with all of that, I think you'll be able to see that the chickens are coming home to roost. It's really hard to hide from the world the truth of what happened here. And remember, in the big picture of this entire investigation and attempted prosecution of Richard Allen, the huge red flags that were raised, particularly egregious or appalling, was the 70 days of deleted footage from the interview rooms in the first week and then 6 months of this investigation. Absolutely unbelievable that they would have lost or deleted or recorded over 70 days of information in the most important months of this murder, or after this murder of this case. It's also appalling that they would have lost fingerprints. It's also appalling that they would have lost the Marathon gas station footage near Riley Park. It's also appalling that they would have not gone and gathered all of the cameras from around town to track the movements of people. It's also appalling that they refused to allow the geofencing, any of the geofencing, into this case, which it's very clear geofencing alone would have proven many aspects of the movements of various individuals in the hours before, during, and after the alleged time frame that these murders allegedly happened. It's also appalling that they would have not have investigated Ron Logan further and Keegan Kline further after Reese Davis brought forth the information that he did. It's furthermore appalling that there would have been so many confessions and so much information, particularly the information developed by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, followed up upon by Greg Ferenczi, Todd Click, and Kevin Murphy, that was totally ignored. It's also appalling that Jerry Holman would have personally ensured that no one looked into Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, Rod Abrams, and all those other guys. It's pretty appalling that you have informants tied into this case, like Derek German, Ashley Garth, Garrett Kurtz, Anna Williams, and others who were not looked at all. It's furthermore appalling that ISP and Unified Command would have recruited other informants to come out here and steer the public narrative for years. It's furthermore appalling that Doug Carter would have kicked the FBI off out of this case at the same time they decided they were going to delete the 70 days of shit, totally change the direction of the investigation, and start an obscene amount of podcast rounds, press conferences, crime con appearances, live stream appearances, partnering with all the social media and all the things that were done to steer the public perception about this case. There is so much that is absolutely unbelievable that was done here that even a blind man would see that clearly this is a cover-up. Now, of what? I can't tell you. By who? I don't know. But with everything this community had put together and figured out in all of these years going back, too much information has reached the surface that cannot be put back in that bag. You can call it Pandora's box. You can say the cat's out of the bag. No matter what way you put it, the public knows too much, and the public will not stop knowing too much. No matter how much is scrubbed off the internet, no matter how many people retract their statements and try to claim what they said they didn't say and what they did they didn't do and da 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 da. We know too much, we've seen too much, and too much has been documented. So, pardon the expression, but it's a total shit show. Like a lot of the YouTubers out here. Total shit show. So, with that being said, I'll get into this, but I hope everyone has a good night and had a good day today and a nice long weekend. Appreciate you all. And thanks for being here for each other, for myself, and for Libby and Abby. So, to summarize the appeal for everyone, the appeal centers around three main issues, or maybe I would say three pillars. And those main pillars or issues are that Tony Liggett lied and omitted information on the PCA or the search warrant application for Richard Allen. The second issue is that Richard Allen was unconstitutionally detained as a pretrial detainee in a maximum security prison in a solitary unit, solitary confinement, for 13 months. During this period, he developed a deep psychosis, which was medically documented, such to the extent that he was forcibly medicated on at least 3 or 4 occasions that we know of. During this very period that he was suffering from this psychosis and being medicated, he made confession-like statements. These statements included aspects that had zero relationship to reality of what we know happened to these girls. For instance, the shooting of the girls with a gun, with bullets, shooting the girls to kill them, and raping the girls, confessing to crimes that didn't happen, according to the state. And it's funny that although he produced confessions that included things like shooting the girls and raping them, which the state says didn't happen, they still used, they cherry picked those confessions made during this period of psychosis and used those in the court against him and did not allow a defense for those. And that was all the judges in discretion. They furthermore allowed a cop to take the stand and position himself as an expert in voice analysis to try to tie Richard Allen to the Bridge Guy video. In the course of that, they also lied about what was relayed in the audio on the Bridge Guy video, saying that you can hear the sound of the racking of a gun and you can hear the sound of the words, "that be a gun," to try to insert a gun into that video. And after the release of that alleged video from the phone, we all realized upon listening, there's no sound of a racking of a gun. There's crunching of leaves. And there's no phrase uttered, "that be a gun." The phrase that is uttered is, "this is the path that we go down." This is all law enforcement and prosecutor lying to the jury. The third element of this appeal is whether the court or the judge denied a fair trial in totality, denying him the opportunity to present the defense of his choice, to explain the crime scene, and to impeach the quality of the investigation. This appeal is so compelling that it's absolutely mind-blowing. And it's funny that this made it to the surface, because as we had tracked this going back years and years and years, we were seeing this unfold in real time. And we were all feeling handcuffed, powerless to do anything about it. And we were powerless to do anything about it. But we consistently tracked this and commented on it and critiqued it and criticized it. We stood here with megaphones loudly blasting this to the world. And there were so many issues. What you see here in the appeal are only 3 issues of 30. This is only the tip of the iceberg of what actually happened here. But unfortunately, this was the choice that the appellate attorneys made, to focus on these 3 issues. I believe they could have focused on 5 or 10 issues. But what we have is what we have. But that's the summary of your issues here, over here, documented in the statement of issues. Now, keep in mind what follows is going to be interesting, because these are going to be the different opinions of the statement of the case and the different opinions of the statement of facts. So it's going to be interesting to do the side-by-side comparison of what the defense says the case and the issues are and the facts are, and what the state says the case, the issues, and the facts are. And this can be supplemented with opening and closing arguments, which I would absolutely highly recommend that all of you listen to or review for yourselves, because opening and closing arguments were absolutely appalling in the trial of Richard Allen. Anyhow, in the statement of the case, it says, on October 28th, 2022, the state charged Richard Allen with 2 counts of felony murder by kidnapping, which was amended on March 22nd, 2024, to add 2 counts of murder. On November 11th, 2024, following a 25-day trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. The trial court sentenced Allen to an aggregate sentence of 13 times 10 years, 130 years. There's that number again. They will say to you repeatedly that there's no occult connection here. But the number 13 and the number 213 permeates this case going all the way back to day 1. Remember, when this occurred was on 213. Anyhow, Allen filed a motion to correct errors, which the trial court denied, which is another sub element of point issue number 3 here. Statement of facts: on February 14th, 2017, 14-year-old Liberty German and 13-year-old Abigail Williams were found dead in the woods. 2 days later, Allen, like many others, came forward and reported that he had been on the trail that day and saw 3 girls. Because law enforcement wanted to know whether he had seen any possible suspects, he was interviewed in a parking lot. After the interview, the lead was marked cleared. Cleared. He was cleared. And now we're going to go here with parenthetically the caveat that allegedly, according to the story from the state, the report was misfiled. Now, we don't believe that at all. But Allen then returned to his job, family, and home in the small Delphi community. And for the next 5 years, he did not sell his car, destroy his clothes, dispose of his gun, or relocate. All things that a guilty person would absolutely do, having just murdered 2 little girls in a small town. But Allen continued his normal routine. No witness identified Richard Allen as Bridge Guy. Now, when the report was allegedly rediscovered, which is another myth, okay, that's a whole story that we have proven to you with receipts. But according to the state, when the report was allegedly rediscovered in September 2022, law enforcement insisted Allen was Bridge Guy without a single eyewitness or shred of evidence. Over the next several years, the state built its house of cards, i.e., its case against Richard Allen. The Bridge Guy video under warrant. On February 13th, 2017, around 1:30 p.m., Liberty German's older sister allegedly dropped Libby and Abby off at the Monon High Bridge Trail to explore and take photos. No, to meet some boys. Okay, see, this is what I mean. You're listening to the defense's perspective of the state's theory here. But I'll just help you clear it up and put this into context of factual reality. Around 1:30 p.m., no, possibly between 1 p.m., but maybe as early as 1 a.m., Liberty German's older sister or another family member dropped off the girls at the High Bridge Trail or Ron Logan's to explore and take photos. No, to meet some boys. Again, weird. The girls had the day off from school and the weather was unseasonably warm. Why does this phrase permeate this case? Unseasonably warm, unseasonably warm. It's like a spell that's being cast. Was it unseasonably warm? Not really. No, that's some sort of weird spell that's being cast over this case. Who knows what that actually means? But apparently the weather was unseasonably warm, which is just a weird hocus pocus that permeates this case. When the girls failed to meet Liberty German's father at the specified time and no one could reach them, allegedly, Liberty German's family contacted police and an extensive search began. I call that the freak out when the girls don't show up. Okay, there's an absolute immediate freak out. See, this is where this appeal is kind of like it's only arguing the state's theory. It's totally disconnected from reality. What really happened is the family freaked the fuck out immediately, lost their shit. Okay. And there was an absolute freak out immediately on the afternoon of the 13th. The next day around noon, no, approximately around anywhere between sunrise and 10:30 a.m., the girls' bodies were found. Okay. However, the state's theory is what they're repeating is that the next day around noon, they were found murdered in the woods. No, they were found somewhere between sunrise and 10:30 a.m. Hours later, it was announced that their bodies were found, which is approximately at noon. They were found in the woods near Deer Creek, not far from the High Bridge. The best evidence law enforcement had was from Liberty German's phone found at the scene, oddly, under Abby Williams' body. What kind of killer would leave a phone that had documented him or recorded him? What kind of killer would ever leave footage of himself that on a phone under a victim's body? What kind of killer would not make sure that he took that phone and destroyed it, or at a minimum, threw it in the goddamn creek so that the water would destroy it? Okay, realize the appellate attorneys here do not argue in reality. They argue against what the state's narrative is, which is a fairy tale narrative. Liberty German allegedly recorded a 43-second video, okay, which we believe may have been planted on the phone, being the reason that the phone was left under a body. We believe that that footage may have been fabricated and then planted and then left under the body of Abigail Williams. This video apparently shows Abigail Williams walking across a bridge with someone, bridge guy, which is a term I don't like, behind her. Law enforcement allegedly enhanced the video recording, yielding the following. And they announced in the years prior they had used Disney and NASA's state-of-the-art technology, which I believe may have been AI, because if AI came to consumers in the past few years, did Disney and NASA have access to AI 7, 8 years ago? 9, 10? Why would Disney and NASA have to participate in the enhancement or manipulation of this video? Possibly because they are the ones holding the state-of-the-art technology that's not released to the public until 10 years later or so. Law enforcement set up a tip line to funnel in information that they could use to steer the narrative on this case, but that's a whole other story. And people came forward. 16-year-old Rayleigh Voorhees, her sisters Isabella Voorhees and Anna Spath, and her friend Bree Wilbur. So think about this now. Rayleigh, Isabel, and Anna are all one unit because they're sisters. So that's a thing it's a bullet point to keep in your mind, that you have not 3 girls. Yeah, sure, it's 3, but these 3 are really functionally one because they are all sisters of one family, okay? And then you have an outlier who is Brianna Wilbur. Brianna Wilbur has a father who was considered a POI over these years. Another oddity. Not only that, there's a connection to the family. making all of these juvenile witnesses highly questionable, all having some conflict of interest in having a direct relationship with the victims and the victims' families. These juvenile witnesses told police that they were on the trail, and as they were leaving, they saw a man near the entrance to the Freedom Bridge. I should add parenthetically that when they were shown this image of Bridge Guy, they all said, yeah, that's who I saw. They also all described him as extremely tall, muscular, like he could rip your arms off, and shit like that. Betsy Blair, who frequently walked the trails for exercise, came forward and told police she saw a man on the high bridge standing on a platform who seemed to be waiting for someone. She thought the man was the guy in the video because he was wearing similar clothing. She claims when she reached the bridge, she turned around and noticed two girls approaching. The state says these two girls are Abby and Libby, the victims. We say, no way, Jose, hasn't been proven. Just like it hasn't been proven that Bridge Guy killed anybody, just like it hasn't been proven that Richard Allen is Bridge Guy, just like it hasn't been proven that anybody saw Bridge Guy, it also hasn't been proven that anybody saw those girls. What we know for sure, you had multiple girls out there. At some point, unknown to any of the people out here commenting on the case, except one who's a partner of mine, those girls split up at some point. And we have that documented as fact. In other words, this group of allegedly 4 girls at some point in time split up. So at some point in time, this group of 3 girls or 4 girls became 3 girls and 1 girl. And then that same group of 4 girls then became 2 girls and 2 girls. Because these girls were, for lack of a better term, fucking around and splitting up, going here and there, possibly meeting up with somebody in the parking lot at the Mears lot. These girls were performing actions that are not described by the state at all and are not considered in the overall consensus of what these girls did that day. I know for sure, because it's documented, that these girls split up during this whole escapade, and that's not brought or considered in any of this bullshit narrative and timeline. Betsy Blair could have well seen 2 of the girls from the group of 4, which is my assumption. We also know we had several other kids out there, which is another thing, that they've suddenly been disappeared from this entire thing. So when it comes to kids out there, you've got a multitude of kids out there. These kids are grouping off into different groups. They're going different places. Some are going under the bridge. Some are going over to the fucking geocache. Some are going over to the parking lot. Some are going over to Freedom Bridge. They're moving all around. All of these kids are splitting up in different groupings, going different places. There's probably some weed smoking going on or cigarette smoking. There's probably some hanky panky and meeting with some little boys going on. There's a bunch of shit going on with all of these teenagers, and none of it is acknowledged in this state's timeline. So that's something to keep in your back of your mind when you're reading all of this. Think of how stupid and the tunnel vision that goes into this. Because when it says Betsy Blair witnessed 2 girls, assuming that she witnessed those victims is absolutely insane. She may have witnessed those 2 victims if they were actually there, boots on the ground at that point in time. But like I said, she may have witnessed any number of other 2 girls. Okay? maybe two from the four, maybe two others who showed up at the same time. So there's a whole bunch of fuckery going on with all of these kids. And the fact that Betsy Blair can't point at Richard Allen and say that's who I saw, and the fact that Betsy Blair can't point at Abby and Libby and say that's who I saw, and the fact that these girls can't point at Richard Allen and say that's who I saw, and the fact that the girls can't come and tell the truth that, yeah, we split up at one point in time and the two of us went here and one of us went here and this one went there and one sat on the bench and one did this, one went under the bridge. There's no truth being told. There's nothing but half truths being told, which makes all of this possible. Okay, then you got another loose cannon here brought into this narrative, which is here. An entire 4 months later, after the murders, law enforcement suddenly interviewed Sarah Carbaugh. She told police that on February 13th, while driving eastbound on County Road 300, she saw a muddy man wearing a tan coat walking west towards town. Just like the other juvenile witnesses, after being shown an image of Bridge Guy, she said that was the man she had seen. Then she changed her story about what color clothing he was wearing to match the image she had seen of Bridge Guy. It's a whole other concept that they leave out of this. All right. Now, fast forward in time, 5.5 years later, Richard Allen. Again, I'm going to reiterate to you that now we're repeating the state's narrative because this is what they're arguing against. Allegedly, on September 21st, 2022, law enforcement rediscovered the tip from Richard Allen. But we know this bullshit because we know that a bunch of YouTubers had sent in the information on Richard Allen in the months prior to that. At some point in time, investigators obviously printed out that tip that they had dug up after receiving the tip from the YouTubers, allegedly. They printed that out, put it in a box, and staged it for Kathy Shank to find, is what I assume. Because suddenly they had a friend of Ron Logan's family, and that's Kathy Shank, an apparently impeachable old lady who they thought would be a good scapegoat for the accountability for this tip or a story. They thought this would be a good story to present to the public that, oh, this sweet little old lady just happened to find this tip in a drawer, when we know for certain that YouTubers had tipped in Richard Allen, the troll farm. Law enforcement rediscovered the tip from Richard Allen, according to these narrative points from the state. In the February 2017 tip, Allen called and said he was on the bridge between maybe 1 and 3 and saw 3 girls. Allen shared his address, phone number, and MEID number, which is a unique identifier that can be used to track the phone's location. So, on that note, all of these bloodlust or guilty demons or guilter demons who like to convince you all that Richard Allen was trying to hide his phone, if he was trying to hide his phone, he would have not brought his phone, given his phone number, given his address, and given the MEID number off the back of the phone, which they could have used to track the phone's location. So the concept of Richard Allen hiding his phone is another false narrative point they've inserted in here to demonize Richard Allen. Just like they try to say that this guy walking towards the trails was angry, walking with a purpose, not replying when they said hi, parked in backwards so no one could see his license plate. The lead investigators, in other words, Jerry Holman and Tony Liggett, immediately started quote unquote investigating the now 50-year-old Richard Allen. Remember, the witness claimed, Betsy Blair claimed the guy she saw was 20 years old, not 22, not 20 to 30, not 25, not 28, not looking 30, 20 years old. 20 years old is who she saw. Well, they started investigating 50-year-old Allen. They believed, which is a key term there, that the man the 4 girls saw was Richard Allen, i.e. Bridge Guy. Allen still lived in the same house, still worked at the same CVS as he did in 2017. And remember, we said before, he still owned the same coat, the same car, the same boots, the same gun. When police showed up at his house on October 13th, coincidentally, Allen agreed to talk with him. After riding to the police station, Allen patiently answered their questions about his personal life and the walk he took on that day, or what he could remember of it 5.5 years prior. Allen explained after spending the morning with his mother on February 13th, 2017, he went home to get a jacket before going to the trails. He walked out to the first platform of the bridge, looked at the fish, and walked back before returning home to watch the stock market. He explained that he came forward because law enforcement asked for people to come forward because they wanted to speak with anyone who had been on the trails that day. The next day, he met with a DNR officer in a parking lot. Allen believed he had told the officer he was on the trail between noon and 1:30 or 1:45. He could only recall seeing 3 girls leaving the trail, which is another discrepancy. Like I said, we don't know who Richard Allen saw. He could have seen those 3 girls because maybe that was when Juana had broken off from them. He could have seen 3 other girls because we know there were other girls out there. We don't know who Richard Allen saw. Being that 5 years had passed, Allen could not remember what car he drove or the clothes he wore. Because let me ask you this. Could you remember on a random day 5.5, 6 years ago what you were wearing? When asked what type of jacket he was wearing, he didn't remember and listed all the jackets he owned. A blue Carhartt, which we now know was purchased years after the murders. A black Carhartt, or off-brand, with a hood, sweatshirts, hoodies, and a fleece. He kept a skull cap in his jacket. He could have been wearing tennis shoes or boots. He basically listed all the clothes he owned because that's what one would do if one did not recall the specific outfit one was wearing on a particular day 5 or 6 years prior. When law enforcement asked for consent to search his home, Allen expressed concern that they were making him somebody's fall guy by trying to fit pieces together that did not fit. He was confused, thinking they were talking to him to look for helpful information to solve the case. Although he understood they had to clear everyone on the trail, he was bothered by the passage of time. Now, after a break during which there was a little powwow, with the cops, law enforcement returned to the interview more confrontational with Allen, who became frustrated with being accused of murdering 2 little girls, and law enforcement contacting his wife and daughter while he was at the station. Confronting Allen with the bridge guy photo, Allen responded, "If that's taken with the girl's phone, that's not me. I've never met those girls before." They accused Allen of admitting he wore the same clothes as bridge guy, and Allen corrected the investigator, reminding him that he said he could have been wearing a sweatshirt. Allen then added that everyone has looked at bridge guy photo for years. To him, it didn't even look like bridge guy was wearing a Carhartt, which is an extremely poignant observation because, I own a Carhartt jacket too. And the moment I saw that jacket or that bridge guy footage and I heard that they were trying to claim it was a Carhartt, I thought, that's not a Carhartt jacket. It's not a Carhartt. It's weird that they are trying to somehow, why are the narrative pushers so insistent upon the concept that that's a Carhartt jacket when there's nothing to prove that it's a Carhartt jacket. There's no Carhartt insignia. It doesn't appear to be a canvas type jacket. It has the appearance more so of a windbreaker. Anyhow, finally, when law enforcement accused him of either being out there to kill the girls or introduce them to someone to kill the girls, Allen said, "Good fucking luck finding anything that points to me." Allen repeatedly told law enforcement, "Arrest me or take me home." Remember? Arrest me or take me home. They would not stop. Eventually, he had to get up and walk out to end the interview. The story Liggett told the judge on October 13th, 2022. Now, this is what's interesting. Remember, it was October 13th, 2022, when they talked to Richard Allen, when they showed up at his house, when they accused him of murdering these girls. That same day, the state applied for a warrant to search his home, car, and electronics. It's my opinion that in that probable cause affidavit, or that probable cause affidavit was already written when they showed up at his house. In other words, before they even started the interview with Richard Allen, they had this probable cause affidavit in a draft form, fully fleshed out, written out, ready to go. After Richard Allen denied them consent to search his home and phone, they went into the computer, they added the couple nuggets that they had extracted from him in this interview, added it to the PCA, right? And then signed it and pushed it forward. In Liggett's PCA, he concluded that Allen is the last individual to have contact with Liberty and Abigail with no proof whatsoever, and is the individual depicted on the Monon High Bridge from the video taken on Liberty's phone. Again, with no proof whatsoever. He reasoned that Allen admitted he was wearing a blue Carhartt jacket, and a head covering like bridge guy, and was on the bridge or the trail around the same time as the abduction. And witnesses, the four girls, Blair and Carba, saw a man they believed to be bridge guy wearing a blue jacket. Detective Liggett implied that Blair and the girls all saw the same man. So this is where it gets funny, okay? Because Liggett, in order to make this work, he had to bring all of this together, all of this disparate witness testimony, all of these disparate facts, all of these contradictions. He had to somehow twist and bend and mend that and mold it into this ball, right? He to ball that all together, pull it all together, and say that, oh yeah, they all saw the same thing. This is all one thing, when it's clear that it's not when you actually look at the details. Detective Liggett also concluded that Allen drove his black 2016 Ford Focus and parked at the old CPS lot on 300 North. He claimed that witnesses, Blair and Wilson, saw a car backed into a parking spot at the CPS building, although they both described different vehicles. Of course, he had to add in there that Wilson's assumption that the driver of the car was trying to conceal the license plate, because, like I said, that incriminates the driver of the car. Wilson claimed that the car was a purple PT Cruiser, which is extremely specific. If you think about, I know many of you out there were around 10 years ago when these PT Cruisers were newer, right? They have a very distinctive shape. And purple is a very distinctive color for a car. So to go out and say, yeah, I saw a purple PT Cruiser, it's a very specific thing. Betsy Blair said, I saw a not red, not white, and not black, some indistinct colored 1965 Mercury Comet looking vehicle with sharper angles. If you think about a PT Cruiser has extremely rounded angles. That's the hallmark of a PT Cruiser, because it's a throwback to the 1930s the retro 1930s body shapes. PT Cruiser. Betsy Blair's seeing a sharp angled 1965 Comet, which is more akin to the later 50s, early 60s shapes of vehicles, which are extremely angular. Total different body shapes. Both being totally different from Richard Allen's like squat, indistinct shaped 2016 or whatever it is Ford Focus. The part of the story Liggett did not tell the judge. Blair's description of the guy she saw on the bridge, who law enforcement calls bridge guy, didn't match Allen at all. Detective Liggett did not tell the judge about the differences between Blair's description of the man on the bridge and Allen's appearance. Just 3 days, on February 17th of 2017, 3 days after she saw this guy, she described him as white, 20, age 20, literally 20, medium build, 150 pounds with curly hair. An artist completed a sketch based upon her description and a facial facial feature identification sheet that they put together, which when she saw the sketch, rated a 10 out of 10 for accuracy. And there it is there. And I know all of you have seen this before. This is the 20-year-old, 150-pound male that she witnessed on the bridge. Again in 2019, 2 years later, Liggett interviewed Blair. She again described the man as slender, youthful, boyish looking, in his 20s to early 30s, no facial hair with poofy brown hair like the sketch portrayed, and still gave this sketch 2 years later a 9 out of 10 in accuracy. Okay? Keep in mind that at the time, Betsy Blair would have seen Richard Allen. If she had seen Richard Allen, he would have been 44 years old and 5'6" with extremely shortly cropped hair. I question whether Betsy Blair saw Bridge Guy at all. How do we know that Betsy Blair saw Bridge Guy? Just like, how do we know that the juvenile witness girls saw Bridge Guy? Nobody knows who saw Bridge Guy. And even if any of them did see Bridge Guy, the same individual portrayed in this video that was on Libby's phone, even if someone did see the literal Bridge Guy, did they see Richard Allen? Because I don't see anyone saying that they saw Richard Allen. Remember, there were a lot of male individuals witnessed out there. I want to say there's 6 or 7 witness sketches, all portraying what appear to be different individuals. If all of these different individuals were witnessed out there and sketched, let's say even if it's half of that, 3 or 4, if there's 3 or 4 guys that were out there at the same day, the same time, we've got this sketch, We've got that older guy sketch, and then we've got 3 or 4 other sketches. How many guys were actually out there of adult age? Betsy Blair's description of the oddly parked car that did not match Allen's. Detective Liggett omitted Blair's description of the oddly parked car as resembling a 1965 Ford Comet, which she also testified to at trial. By the way, for the idiots in the back who deny reality, at trial, and it's in the trial transcripts, under direct examination, she testified that the car she saw resembled closely a 1965 Mercury Comet that was not black and had sharper angles. Below is her drawing of the car compared to Allen's hatchback. So you can see here, the sketch she produced appears to be a 1960s profile type of sketch of a vehicle. You guys remember the 1960s? I mean, I don't. I wasn't alive. But I've seen all those trash-ass 1960s B films, right? You look at all the trashy movies and TV shows from the 60s, you see nothing but cars of this shape. Now, take a look at Richard Allen's Ford Focus there. Richard Allen's Ford Focus is black. Okay. Wake up call. Not black. Okay. The vehicle Betsy Blair witnessed was not black. Richard Allen's is black. Betsy Blair testified to seeing a 1965 Mercury Comet looking vehicle with sharper angles similar to one her father owned. When she was shown a photo of the vehicles out there that day, she picked out Dave McCain's photo of his vehicle. She picked out Dave McCain's vehicle, not Richard Allen's. You think they didn't show Betsy Blair Richard Allen's Ford Focus? Remember, they went to CVS to take photos surreptitiously of Richard Allen's Ford Focus. Are you telling me they didn't throw Richard Allen's car in front of Betsy Blair to see if she'd point at it? And instead, she points at David McCain's vehicle? Which means, did David McCain lie about where he parked his vehicle? I don't know. Or did she misremember where she saw it parked? I don't know. Sure would be helpful to have that Hoosier Harvest Store footage so that the public could determine for themselves the movements of all the vehicles that passed those cameras that day, right? And it says here, she said the car was not black. And another red flag, Blair did not believe the man she saw on the bridge was the same man Sarah Carbaugh saw walking down the road. Detective Liggett intentionally, maliciously omitted the fact that Betsy Blair told him the man that Sarah Carbaugh described as walking down the road is not the same man that she saw on the bridge. And remember, this is allegedly Sarah Carbaugh's sketch, which I doubt, because this sketch had been referred to over the years by both Kelsey German and Tobe Blesenby as a composite photo. And I want to say maybe even Holman, several individuals has referred to this as a composite photo produced with some sort of new technology. I don't believe Sarah Carbaugh produced the sketch by herself. After talking with Blair in 2019, ISP actually issued a press release distinguishing the man Carbaugh saw from the man that Betsy Blair saw on the bridge. And please don't forget that. I think that I recently just showed that to everyone last night on Erica's show. ISP was adamant that the two men are not the same men. And which two men? I mean, this guy and this guy. ISP was adamant. It's so adamant that they produced a press release or a statement clarifying the fact that they are not the same person. Okay? ISP claimed in 2019 that Betsy Blair's sketch of an individual is representative of the face of the person captured in the video on Liberty's cell phone. Sarah Carbo saw the man walking down the road wearing a damn tan coat. Detective Liggett also made false statements in the affidavit. He claimed that an interview was done of Sarah Carbo in 2017. Now listen to that verbiage. An interview of Sarah Carbo was done in 2017, and she stated the man she saw was wearing a blue-colored jacket and was muddy and bloody. Well, actually, in her 2017 interview, Sarah Carbo did not describe the man as muddy. As bloody, only muddy. She furthermore said he was wearing a tan jacket. Richard Allen never said he was wearing a blue Carhartt, and his wife informed law enforcement that he or she had purchased his Carhartt a couple years earlier. Detective Liggett falsified in his affidavit that Allen said he was wearing a blue or black Carhartt with a hood and a head covering. Allen told investigators that he did not know what he was wearing, and it could have been anything from a Carhartt to a sweatshirt. Although Allen's wife said he had a blue Carhartt in 2022, Liggett omitted the fact that she informed him that he had purchased that coat just a couple years ago. And there's proof of that. The trial court issued that warrant based upon all the falsified and omitted information. Law enforcement seized from Allen's home multiple items, including a Sig Sauer handgun, knives, casings, and the Carhartt jacket with a white and yellow patch on the front pocket. It's important to remember that Bridge Guy's coat does not have the patch on the front like Carhartt or Richard Allen's Carhartt. Nevertheless, these items were featured prominently during trial. This is the jury being lied to, the jury being misled, and Richard Allen being railroaded. Finally, Allen denied the bullet was his, that he was Bridge Guy or had anything to do with the murders. At the scene, officers found an unspent .40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge near Liberty's right ankle. When ISP analyst Melissa Oberg cycled 6 cartridges through Allen's gun, she could not find any marks that matched. You understand? She could not establish a link between Allen's gun and this unspent round. For some reason, she decided to fire 4 bullets through Allen's gun. She then went through and nitpicked or cherry-picked and compared the markings to those fired cartridges to the one that was unspent and just ejected, and was able to fabricate and piece together random striations, markings on these unspent cartridges that enabled her to assert that Allen's gun was the source of some of the markings. You can't make this shit up. You can't make this shit up. This is not how ballistics works. As a matter of fact, if you're able to review the slides for yourselves, you can clearly see it's a far, far reach. And any really expert firearm aficionado will tell you this ain't how it works. Now remember, the judge allowed her to take the stand and claim that she had never been wrong, and that there's only ever, at most, a 2% error rate of false positives. Well, after learning of Oberg's ability to piece this shit together and fabricate this evidence, law enforcement interrogated Allen again. For about an hour and a half, Detective Holman yelled, screamed like a maniac, acted like a gorilla, pounding his chest, yelling, screaming, accusing Allen of killing Abby and Libby, or at least being involved, which would indicate, hey, wouldn't that indicate there's other actors out there? Oh, but suddenly, no, he's a lone wolf killer? Okay. Allen explained the very day police asked anyone on the trail to come forward that he came forward. I went on a walk for the trail and went home. I did not murder 2 little girls. Detective Holman repeatedly screamed and yelled and pounded his chest and acted like a gorilla and confronted Allen with Oberg's questionable conclusion that the marks on the casing at the scene matched his gun. Each time, Allen denied that the bullet at the scene was from his gun. Holman even claimed that the methodology was scientifical and like fingerprints. Exhausted and frustrated by Detective Holman's relentless accusations and escalations and claims that he murdered Abby and Libby, Allen consistently said he could not tell him what happened to the girls because he doesn't know. He did not know how the round got between the girls' bodies or how they died. He emphatically stated, I did not murder 2 little girls. Despite Detective Holman's lying about experts identifying Allen and his voice on the video, Allen continued to deny that he was involved in Bridge Guy. Detective Holman tried a different lie, saying 5 witnesses saw Allen with Liberty and Abby and his gun. Again, Allen said it did not happen, and I don't care how stressed out I am or I get, I'm not going to admit to something I had nothing to do with. Holman then tried to use Allen's depression against him, claiming it was because he killed 2 little girls. He even used Allen's wife, Kathy, as an interrogation tool. While Allen was being interrogated, ISP told her that the bullet at the scene matched her husband's gun. When they brought her in to see Allen, he hugged her and said, it's going to be all right. While left alone together intentionally, right, because Holman absolutely knows what he's doing by leaving those cameras rolling and pulling all these antics in front of the cameras. She asked how his bullet got at the scene, and he repeated what he told Holman, which was, I'm not going to say anything I didn't do, and I can't explain something I don't understand. I know that no bullet from my gun was connected with the murder in any way, shape, or form. ISP lied to Kathy Allen, too, telling her that a witness identified Allen. Remember, not one witness identified Allen at trial or in any pre-trial hearing. There's no witness whatsoever at all, no way possible. Never happened that anyone witnessed Allen out there. But they lied to Kathy and said, we got a witness that saw Rick out there. We got witnesses that saw Rick with some little girls and a gun, and that's his bullet at the scene. And how does he have sex with you? Allen assured her, they're not going to get away with this. I'm sorry you're having to hurt, and I'm sorry you're having to go through this. So you're starting to see how all of this is stacking up now. Just give me a moment. Excuse me. There was something I wanted to add that I'm not recalling at the moment. Let me see. I may circle back to it if I remember. Let's see. What were we talking about here? Oh, I was going to say, before we leave that interrogation, let me just ask the listeners this. Do you remember this one? How utterly disrespectful this was when Holman said, "You fucking did it. You fucking stuck the knife in them." You guys remember that? You stuck the knife in them? I mean, I'm just sorry, but it's a weird way to phrase what happened to those girls, especially once you've seen the crime scene photos. It doesn't look to me like someone stuck a knife in them. It looks like someone brutally slaughtered them in the most disgusting way possible. But that was part of the guerrilla tactics. Okay. Solitary confinement. Just a few days after 50-year-old Allen was arrested for the first time in his entire life, he was sent to IDOC as a safekeeper. IDOC transferred him to Westville Correctional Unit, a maximum security segregation unit for the worst of the worst. The movies refer to it as the hole, used mostly to punish. Let me remind you guys, it's the absolute worst place in all of Indiana. And do not, for a moment, fail to understand that all of this was a meticulously carried out plan. Okay? And what I mean by that is I mean by Judge Benjamin Diener authoring the safekeeping request, handing it to the sheriff, having the sheriff attach his signature as if he had wrote it, handing it back to Judge Benjamin Diener, then Judge Benjamin Diener signing off on his own safekeeping request, then immediately resigning and blaming the public for his resignation, then handing that safekeeping order over to the IDOC, who then decided to place him in the absolute worst place in Indiana. Do you think any of that was by accident or a coincidence? No, this was a meticulously carried out plan. And here's how you go if you reverse engineer it. You say, we're going to take this motherfucker and we're going to put him in Westville where we have ultimate power and we can break him. Okay. How do we do that? Well, we have to have him designated as a safekeeper in order to do that, because otherwise he'll be in a county jail. So the way we'll do that, we're going to designate him a safekeeper. Then you just go ahead, hand it over to IDOC as per policy. IDOC already has in place the plan that they're going to stick him right in Westville under Gallipo and Jones and Robinson and the Odinist, where we already have total absolute control, and we also have Monica Wallow waiting on the sidelines to go in there. So He's designated for Westville, solitary confinement, Monaco Walla, the Odinus, and Gallipo. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to have the judge author the safekeeping order or request. We're going to have him hand it to the sheriff. We're going to have the sheriff sign it as if he wrote it. We're going to have the judge then go ahead and issue the safekeeping because he knows it's going up to Westville at that point. And then we're going to have him resign because we know this was totally what do you call it? Malfeasance or malpractice or what's the word I'm looking for? It was totally, I can't find my word. It starts with a D. It was totally unacceptable. Okay, whatever. They knew that like every single step of that was a strategy that was laid out. Okay. They needed him. Here's the thing. Who's the presiding judge? Diener. Okay. They need him thrown in the hole in Westville where they have Walla and the Odinus and Gallipo. How do they do that? They have to have the judge do it. How do they get away with accountability and have plausible deniability? They have to have IDOC make that assignment. But they all are communicating behind the scenes. So what they do, they carry out the process. They have the judge write a foolproof safekeeping request. They have the sheriff sign it as if he wrote it. They have the judge then sign it and order it. Then they have him recuse himself, so he has plausible deniability. He can't be held accountable for that action. It won't have an undoing of him being removed from Westville. And then they have IDOC already have the power and the plan to go throw him in Westville. And keep in mind, they did all of this outside of his attorney because at that point in time, he had representation from an attorney. They did this all outside of the purview of his counsel of choice. Just a few days after 50-year-old Allen was arrested for the first time in his life, he was transferred to Westville. Allen was the first safekeeper in any IDOC employee's memory to be placed in Westville. Pretrial safekeepers with mental health issues, such as Allen has, and they knew he had at the time that all this transpired, are usually placed in a mental health unit. The IDOC knew Allen had major depressive disorder when he was hospitalized because he had been hospitalized in 2019 for suicidal ideation. He received a D mental health code, the second most severe, entitling him to one out-of-cell psychologist visit weekly. During the visits, Allen was shackled, confined in a 3-by-3-foot cage, separated from his psychologist. Allen had no face-to-face interaction unless shackled or separated by bars. Outside of his cell, he was restrained with leg irons, handcuffs, a belly chain on a lead, and a shock vest. Other Westville inmates in general population lived in dorms, played games, ate together, watched TV together, and moved freely. Allen was placed in a fucking strip cell, stripped of everything but the bare necessities. Allen's cell, 8.5 by 12.5, had a camera, a mattress on a concrete slab, and was infested by bugs. His only view was a narrow window outside of his eye shot of height facing a razor wire fence. Meals were passed through a cuff door slot, and he ate alone on the floor. Allen was recorded 24/7 with suicide companions, meaning other inmates, outside his cell door, questioning him and writing down statements and tracking his behavior. Guards with video cameras filmed his showers, his every movement outside his cell, and all his attorney meetings, training the camera directly on his lips, having him facing the camera so that they could not only hear what he was saying to his attorneys, but document it on film. IDOC knew that solitary confinement would worsen Allen's mental health condition and major depressive disorder, causing psychosis. because, and in fact, their policy restricts the time frame inmates with serious mental illnesses can stay in solitary for 30 days. But IDOC did not apply its own policy to Allen, and he remained in the solitary confinement cell for 13 months. There's that number again, 13 months. On arrival at Westville in November 22, Allen appeared like a deer in headlights, but was coherent, quiet, and weighed 180 pounds. Remember Betsy Blair's description of a 150-pound, thin 20-year-old? Allen was 180 pounds. By April 2023, though, he had dropped to 135 pounds. That's 45 pounds. He was psychotic and gravely disabled. And remember, this is the time the confessions were extracted from him. Early in custody, Allen maintained his innocence and believed solitary confinement was meant to tear him down. He told the psychologist, Dr. Monica Walla, insane Delphi fangirl, that he felt like a broken man after 2 weeks. Allen described a quiet, normal life previously. He was extremely devoted to his wife. On November 14th, 2022, he told her, "If this becomes too much for me, call the detectives and I'll tell them whatever they want to know." By January 26, 2023, Allen was expressing paranoia. In late March and early April, around the time Allen received his discovery and met with his attorneys, his behavior suddenly worsened. Guards thought he was acting up. He refused meals, became nonsensical, spoke of old Bear Claw hypnotizing him, acted like he was from medieval times. He ripped legal mail, washed his face in his toilet, and drank the toilet water. He stuck a spork into his genitals and covered himself in feces, spit, and vomit, even eating his own feces. Video from early April showed Allen frightened, extremely thin, bleeding, shaking, convulsing, contorting, and interacting with non-existent entities or stimuli. He was pacing back and forth, eating his Bible, and hitting his head against the cell door, which is iron, repeatedly until he had multiple black eyes and was black and blue all over his face. On a video from April 12th, he was naked while he flapped his hands, punched the air, counted imaginary objects, pulled feces from his anus and smeared it into his food, and marched in place. By April 13th, Allen's health had become dire. IDOC psychiatrist Dr. Martin saw him naked, covered in feces with brown fluid emanating from his mouth, and eating it. Dr. Martin found him very psychotic, hallucinating, and incompetent to consent to treatment. On April 14th, IDOC ordered involuntary medication, found him gravely disabled, gave him a working diagnosis of major depressive disorder with psychosis. Remember, this is the same time he's allegedly confessing. He had lost an abnormal amount of weight and was not sleeping. Haldo produced minimal improvements. He continued to speak in loose associations about things like nuclear war, poisoning, being poisoned. He's dying, losing reality, cryogenic eyeballs, and not remembering confessions he had just given. He continued to play with his feces. After letting Allen sit in his feces for 2 hours on April 23rd, he was removed from his cell and given a shower. Allen's symptoms continued throughout May. Dr. Walla diagnosed Allen with a psychotic disorder, noting he had disorganized speech and behavior, but no delusions or hallucinations. On May 25th, his injections or shots were still not working. He paced for 2 hours and banged the back and front of his head repeatedly on the metal door for about an hour. Despite his self-injury and visible goose eggs on his head, no one checked on him. The next day, Allen had 2 black eyes and a black face from banging his head on, and on June 5th was administered another 30-day involuntary emergent Haldol injection, and then another injection on June 16th. On June 20th, Allen was catatonic and extremely skinny. Guards carried him to the infirmary strapped in a chair. After his visit, he remained vacant while staff wiped drool from his mouth. And that same day, Dr. Martin claimed Allen was somehow coherent, oriented, and not psychotic, and had been free of psychosis for 7 weeks. How do you explain these contradictions? Allen confessed to his family over the phone on April 3rd, May 10th, May 17th, June 5th, and June 11th. Now go back and listen to the past 5 or 10 minutes of me reading these dates of his psychosis, his involuntary medication, all the things he was saying and doing. Compare all of what I just read in the previous 2 pages during this time period and line it up with these dates. This is the exact same time period he's experiencing all of the psychosis, eating his feces, claiming the nuclear war, and if he falls asleep, the world's going to explode, and all this shit he's doing. It's the same exact time, April 3rd, May 10th, May 17th, June 5th, June 11th. Same time that he's confessing to this crime, and like I said, to elements of the crime that don't even exist, like shooting the girls. On April 3rd, he told his wife, "I did it. I killed Abby and Libby," later saying, "I think I did it." On May 17th, he insisted to his mother, that he had killed the girls. The next day, May 18th, he's banging his head against his cell door to the point he had a gash. On June 5th and 11th, he told his wife he did it, but that he has lost his mind. He's probably going to unalive himself. Feels like he's already in hell and does not understand what is happening. From April through June, guards repeatedly claimed that they heard Allen confess, "I killed Abby and Libby," amidst all this bizarre behavior. His statements occurred while he smeared feces, rolled in it, drank toilet water, shouted at his shadows, sang, masturbated, marched in place, saluted, and asked nonsensical questions, hit his head, and asked if he was dead. On April 29th, Allen made a more specific statement to a guard, allegedly, claiming he had killed 2 girls in Delphi with a box cutter that he stole from and left in the trash at CVS. He was going to grape them, but panicked and killed them. He said they were screaming. Just the day before, he was covered in feces, and that's the exhibit proving that fact. On April 5th, just after the confessions started, Allen's emotions shifted rapidly. He questioned whether he was God. He slipped a sheet under the door, wanting to confess to the warden. Later, Allen told Dr. Walla, "I killed Abby and Libby. I'm sorry." He had intense eye contact, bizarre smiling, and circumstantial thought. Although he would go off on a tangent and sometimes never return to the original topic, Dr. Walla claimed his confessions were concise. Allen said he was motivated by sex, but uncertain whether he had sex with the girls. But coincidentally, he also, at a different point, alleged that he had raped or had sexual relations with the girls and shot them. Allen also confessed to molesting his sister and daughter, claims directly contradicted by them. He also confessed parenthetically to killing other individuals that he had not killed. 2 days later, Allen asked Dr. Walla if he had confessed. On May 2nd, he was very tangential, repeating himself and jumping between topics. He said, "I killed Abby and Libby, and I will kill everyone. I will wipe out the whole world after I die." He mentioned World War III and was confusing nightmares with reality. He thought he might have schizophrenia and was randomly saying methamphetamine and telling people, including Dr. Walla, that he loves them. The day before, Dr. Walla was, in fact, unable to have a meaningful conversation with him. On May 3rd, he confessed to following the girls to the bridge when a bullet fell out his gun, and he said down the hill. Question: where's the bullet? Where's the bullet? Okay, if a bullet fell out his gun before he said down the hill, where's the bullet? He was going to rape them, but he saw a van. No, he didn't. He said he saw a vehicle. Okay. Why did a van come into this when he didn't say van? He crossed the creek, he slit their throats, and covered their bodies with tree branches. He also said he feared missing Easter, thought his interactions with Dr. Walla were fake, and was paranoid about his safety. After entering a summary into Allen's record, of course, Dr. Walla, destroyed her notes. Oh, you mean just like Dan Doolin destroyed his notes and the recording? On May 10th, with Dr. Walla present, Allen told his wife, I did this. I killed Abby and Libby. Remember, May 10th, go compare it to those other dates and the dates of smearing feces, eating feces, and banging their heads and all that. While insisting he was losing his mind. He continued believing he was dead, that the world would blow up if he fell asleep, that the water was poisoned, and that he was reliving the same day over and over again. Dr. Walla listened to podcasts 3 hours a day while driving to and from treating Richard Allen. Before Richard Allen was even arrested, she admitted that she researched a suspect on IDOC's database. And after treating Allen, she posted on social media about his case. She also admitted to listening to all the Gilter and confidential informants podcasts. Remember, I said previously that she had disclosed this to her employer, and they assigned her to treat Richard Allen despite that. Beginning October 17th, 2024, the state tried Allen on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of felony murder. During the 25-day trial, the state built its case against Allen on 7 points. What the jury heard. The jury saw the video of Bridge Guy on Liberty's phone. They also heard from 2 of the 4 girls, Rayleigh Voorhees and Bree Wilbur, Betsy Blair and Sarah Carba. After seeing the video, the witnesses believed that they saw Bridge Guy on February 13th, despite all giving different descriptions of who they saw. Blair thought she saw Bridge Guy on platform 1 of the bridge. She described the man as white, possibly in his 20s or 30s. No, she described him as 20, with brown poofy hair and youthful or boyish in appearance. She believes Abby and Libby approaching the bridge while the man was still on it, although we don't know that to be a fact. Blair's Fitbit data placed her near the bridge at the time of Libby's video, but again, very questionable, because where's the actual data? Why are we looking at a screenshot of the data rather than the forensic data itself? Same with all of the screenshots in this case. Although Carba in 2017 reported seeing a muddy man with a tan coat about 4 p.m., by trial, she had changed her story and claimed the man was muddy and bloody and wearing a blue jacket like the man in the video. Also, surveillance video captured a car like Allen's driving down 300 North at 1:27 p.m. The prosecutor argued that this was Allen shortly before he parked and walked to the trail, and that Carba saw Allen walking back to his car after committing these murders. At trial, no eyewitness identified Richard Allen as Bridge Guy. The prosecutor, however, told the jury that Allen must be Bridge Guy because every witness is adamant that the person they saw was Bridge Guy. There's no doubt in their mind. And Blair, according to the prosecutor, must have seen Allen right before the girls because Allen told us he went onto the Monon High Bridge out on the first platform, which is exactly what Betsy Blair told you. Trooper Brian Harshman, who had listened to Allen's jail phone calls, was allowed to testify that he believed it was Allen's voice in the video. The jury also heard from a battle of firearm experts over the bullet. For the state, Oberg testified that when she matched test firings from Allen's gun to the unspent cartridge at the murder scene, she applied the Association of Firearm and Two-Mark Examiner's methodology. She gave an error rate for the methodology of 2.2% false positives and 2.87% for false negatives. She discussed studies and articles that she reviewed to apply the methodology. Oberg admitted that the AFTE methodology is subjective, but she testifies that in her 17 years of applying it, she was unaware of ever having made a mistake in identification. During closing, the prosecutor told the jury that she's never been wrong. For the defense, Eric Warren, an expert in applied AFTE methodology, testified that comparing 2 marks on an unspent cartridge with 2 marks on a spent test firing is akin to comparing apples and oranges. And in his opinion, there was insufficient agreement on the 2 marks to match Allen's gun with the unspent casing found at the murder scene. Remember, he's also an expert in this AFTE methodology, although he was not Allen's chosen witness because the judge didn't allow William Tobin to take the stand and criticize this methodology. Again, because of the strong arming of the judge. Timeline. Christopher Cecil testified regarding the movement and health data on Liberty's phone. The girls encountered Bridge Guy at 2:13 p.m., and Liberty's phone stopped registering movement at 2:32 p.m. He summarized the movement data as follows. 1:31 p.m. to 2:08 p.m., 1,682 steps walked. 2:08 to 2:18 p.m., 413.38 meters walked. 2:25 to 2:32, 2 flights climbed, and final movement recorded. The state argued that this activity overlapped with Allen being on the trails, with no proof, mind you, and Allen completing the murders, with no proof, mind you, and leaving the scene by 3:56 p.m., where he was seen by Sarah Carball walking on 300 North, with no proof, mind you. Allen contested this timeline through Stacey Eldridge, a former FBI forensic analyst. She testified that indeed someone inserted wired headphones or an auxiliary cable into Liberty's phone at 5:45 p.m. and removed it at 10:32 p.m. This would silence the phone. And she noted that an incoming phone call occurred moments, basically instantly, right before the headphones or auxiliary cable was plugged in to the phone, which would have silenced that phone. In response to Stacey Eldridge's testimony, the state asked Cecil whether water damage could be responsible for Eldridge's findings. Over a hearsay objection, Cecil testified that he Googled it during the trial and found some unspecified, non-peer-reviewed troubleshooting forums that reported that water damage or dirt within the headphone socket could mimic headphones being inserted. When the state arrested Allen, it had no explanation for the murders. However, the state argued that once placed in solitary, Allen confessed to the crime and the motive. While gravely disabled, Allen confessed to guards, to Dr. Walla, and to his family. He told Dr. Walla he was going to grape these girls, but panicked and killed them. He said they were screaming. Question: Why did no one hear the screams? I know this. I've been out there. I've yelled and screamed to hear what it sounds like. Sound carries. Remember, there were screams at 2 a.m. on the 14th that multiple individuals heard. But for some reason, no one heard a damn thing at 2:13, 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, that entire time frame, 2 to 4 p.m. No one heard a damn thing. Are you kidding me? Now, the prosecutor argued that the jury should believe Allen's confessions despite his psychosis, relying on the opinions of Delphi fangirl Dr. Walla, the bloodlusty Odinist guards, and biased trooper Brian Harshman, who reviewed Allen's video and phone calls. The prosecutor claimed that Allen's confessions were logical and organized and the product of free will and his newly found religion. Almost every guard testified that Allen's bizarre behavior was orchestrated and not the product of mental illness. One guard said he knew Allen was truthful in his confessions because of the look in his eye. This was all allowed to be said to the jury. Some guards claimed inmates commonly smear or eat feces as a tool for attention. None are mental health professionals or knew of Allen's mental health code. Keep in mind that Dr. Walla and her supervisors were consistently injecting him involuntarily with antipsychotics during this entire time frame. Each time Allen confessed to Dr. Walla, she said he was not delusional, not hallucinating, or psychotic. Although Allen expressed confusion and memory gaps, she suspected he was feigning or acting bizarrely. Well, then why was she force medicating him with antipsychotics? On cross, she admitted that she may have been wrong and Allen might have been genuine. With hindsight, she was on the fence. Well, how about hindsight for force medicating him with antipsychotics if he's feigning? The state was allowed to introduce 31 suicide observation reports containing Dr. Walla's opinions. She continued to find Allen non-psychotic, right? While simultaneously documenting paranoia, delusional thoughts, confusion about being dead, and self-injuries. She at times labeled him as feigning or for secondary gain. The day before he was deemed gravely disabled, she wrote he could be exaggerating or consciously deteriorating. When he ate his feces, she called that behavior unclear. Dr. Martin, her supervisor, believed Allen was psychotic, but in remission after an April Haldol injection shot and was back to baseline by May 2nd. Dr. Walla, like Dr. Walla, he described psychotic symptoms, yet concluded that he was much improved. When either doctor acknowledged psychosis, they attributed it to factors other than solitary. Regarding Allen's phone call confessions, Trooper Harshman and Allen's demeanor was Allen's demeanor was calm and solemn, and he was not under duress or stress. He opined Allen acted this way for attention. Again, why were they then force medicating him with antipsychotic, long-lasting injections? Allen called Dr. Polly Westcott, a neuropsychologist who opined that Allen entered IDOC with major depressive disorder and physically and mentally decompensated, showing early signs by December and March, becoming psychotic April to June with residual symptoms later. Okay, remember, this is the exact time these confessions are happening. Allen's solitary confinement, sleep loss, and starvation produced sensory deprivation, delirium, or psychosis. Dr. Westcott believed Allen was psychotic or delirious when confessing to Dr. Walla. After reviewing all records and videos and evaluating Allen for days, she found no evidence of malingering. Dr. Gracian, a psychiatrist experienced with solitary confinement cases, testified that such environments cause psychotic delirium, confusion, and disorientation. Delirious behavior often becomes grotesquely regressive, including smearing feces, sexual acting out, or self harm and suicide. On recovery, memory is often absent. He had no doubt Allen was delirious and saw signs of false memory, common in delirium, where belief evolves into perceived recollections. Some people will say, I think I did it. After a time, uh, they start perceptualizing the event. The more someone tries to remember, the more concrete and distorted the memory becomes, like a game of telephone. A detail only the killer would know. Brad Weber, who lives nearly extremely adjacent to where the girls were found, told the jury he left work in Lafayette around 2:02 p.m. and drove his cargo van directly home, arriving around 2:22 to 2:27. The state claimed Allen confessed to Dr. Walla that he attempted to grape the girls, but was scared after seeing a van, which forced him to flee with the girls across the creek. Allen's statement, the state told the jury, contained a detail only the killer would know. No, the state argued Weber's arrival home was his van, which interrupted Allen, causing him to take Libby and Abby across Deer Creek to kill them. The murder scene was unusual and complex. Liberty German was unclothed, and Abby was wearing Liberty German's clothing. Abby's right leg was positioned underneath her left. Both girls' throats were cut with a sharp instrument. However, the injuries were different. Liberty German had many incised wounds along her neck that it was difficult to determine the number. There were so many. 3 major vessels were injured, and there was a scalloped edge along an incision. Remember that the state's medical examiner had at one point in time previously, for years, determined that there were more than one weapon used, including one with a serrated edge. But after meeting with McClelland before trial, he changed his story to a box cutter. Abby's throat was cut only once and not as deeply as Libby's throat. Abby was likely murdered while wearing Liberty's clothing. Abby died in the location where she was found, according to the state. But after Libby died, her 200-pound body was moved or dragged several yards to its final resting place. This created a V formation with the girls' bodies. Sticks were deliberately arranged on the girls, and there's zero doubt about that if you actually see the crime scene photos. These sticks covered no more than 3% of their bodies. It would have taken up to 20 minutes for Abby to die. Although Libby's injuries were more significant, it would have taken her between 5 and 10 minutes to die. The blood pattern on Abby's hands was noteworthy. When injured, people instinctively reach for major wounds, getting blood on their hands and on their sleeves. Libby had substantial blood on her hands, but Abby had little to no blood at all on her hands or sleeves, indicating that she was either held down or already unconscious at the time that she received her fatal injury. Now, the state's blood pattern expert had never seen clean hands and sleeves in a case involving this amount of blood loss. The absence of this blood on Abby may be consistent with unconsciousness or restraint, but there were no defensive wounds, no bruising, no blunt force trauma, or ligature marks on either girl. Their bodies were lying in the prone position, yet both girls' faces had blood patterns flowing upward against gravity and over their chin and face, indicating that sometime during the murders, a person articulated the girls' torsos or necks above their chins, or in other words, in layman's terms, at some point in time, they were each upside down. They were both upside down as they were bleeding prior to their deaths, okay? It was clear that someone had lifted Libby's body to create a flow pattern. Abby Williams had a similar pattern, which meant her body was also articulated to a position where her neck was above her chin. This occurred while Abby was wearing Libby's clothing. About 4 feet off the ground, there was a notable blood pattern on a tree in Liberty's blood. This is the pattern. It's the F. Okay, it's the rune on the tree. And don't let the state lie to you. Look at it. You can see in the yellow circle here the 4-foot mark where the height of where this mark occurred. And you can see zoomed in the actual mark itself, which is made of several right angles that appear to be placed there by a human finger. I believe this may have been what Tobe Lesenby was referring to as fingerprints at the scene. I believe that the fingerprints at the scene came from this tree. But for some reason, the state claims there's no fingerprints. That's been scrubbed from the internet, but thankfully, it still exists. Okay, we out here have documented Tobe Lesenby stating there were fingerprints. The state performed a sexual assault kit, a rape kit, on both girls and found no physical evidence of sexual assault. Okay? However, there was a seminal-like fluid in both girls. Despite testing the sexual assault kit, hundreds of clippings from the clothing, and swabs from the girls' bodies, cartridge, and cell phone, law enforcement found no DNA from Allen whatsoever. Although, what's left out here is there was a large amount of unidentified male DNA on both girls' bodies, but for some reason it's unidentified, but not Allen's. The state told the jury that Allen controlled the girls, swapped Abby's clothing, articulated their bodies, and moved Liberty all by himself before fleeing the scene by 4 p.m. The state's witnesses repeatedly claimed that Allen used the sticks as camouflage, which is balderdash. They also claimed he moved Liberty's body to make it harder to see, which is senseless. The state argued that this is what caused the blood to flow over Liberty's chin, but they had no explanation for what caused the blood to flow upwards on Abby's face. And for reasons the state could not explain, Allen dressed Abby in Libby's clothes and turned and repositioned her at the scene, causing blood to flow from her neck and over her chin. Although the girl's injuries were different and possibly caused by multiple weapons or different mechanisms altogether, the state's pathologist speculated that a single blade, such as a box cutter, caused all the injuries, including the scalp marks. But as I mentioned before, that opinion had been changed after a meeting with Nicholas McClelland prior to trial. The blood stain on the tree, according to the state, was an inverted L transferred from Libby's arm or hand as she propped herself up against the tree. And a female hair, now alleged to be Kelsey's, had multiple was wrapped around Abby's finger, and multiple incomplete DNA profiles they claimed were seen contamination or background DNA from the girls sharing clothing or through incidental contact with people they knew. According to the state, it could not find Allen's DNA because the blood from Abby and Libby was overwhelming the scene and competing with any DNA Allen had left behind. The manner, quality, and thoroughness of the investigation. At trial, the jury heard about the state's investigation from the day the girls went missing to just a few days later when Allen met with Doolin. The state told the jury to just fast forward 5.5 years, to the volunteer finding Doolin's report. In other words, the state told the jury, no, just ignore everything from day one to the day that we arrested Allen. Ignore everything you've ever heard. Ignore all evidence. Ignore the entire investigation until the day we arrested Allen. Yes, that's what they told the jury. The jury heard nothing regarding the manner, quality, and investigation and thoroughness of the investigation between the day of the murders and the day of Allen's arrest. That's right. On November 11th, 2024, following a 25-day trial, that jury found Allen guilty of 2 counts of murder Allen appeals. Below is the evidence the defense was prohibited from offering the jury. What the jury did not hear. The jury never saw the sketches below, which are the sketch below, which is the man Betsy Blair claims she saw on the bridge when Abby and Libby were approaching. Allegedly approaching, because we don't know that those girls were approaching the bridge after Betsy Blair witnessed this man. The sketch does not look like Allen, who in February 2016 was short, 44 years old, and with closely cropped hair. Blair rated the sketch a 10 out of 10 for accuracy. In 2019, she reaffirmed her confidence in the sketch and insisted she could identify Bridge Guy if she saw him again, but oddly enough, did not identify Richard Allen in that court room. Nor did the jury hear that Blair at one point and the ISP believed the man she saw on the bridge was not the man that Carbaugh saw, who she claimed was muddy and bloody. The jury also never heard that the firearms and two-mark evidence is flawed and unscientific. Allen proffered expert witness William Tobin to explain the scientific community's criticism of the AFTE methodology. William Tobin is a nationally recognized forensic metallurgist. He has extensive experience in metallurgy, bullet and lead analysis, and two-mark principles, along with a background in statistics. He is familiar with the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, which has criticized the AFTE methodology of two-mark identification. Tobin reviewed Oberg's work and was prepared to explain the flaws in the AFTE methodology. He has testified in over 297 cases, and he has been recognized by the state high courts as an expert on this topic. The jury never heard that Allen's confused, disjointed ramblings and screams during the months that Dr. Wallace said Allen was making illogical and organized confessions. The trial court permitted Allen to play 15 videos of him in solitary to impeach his confessions, but required Allen to mute the audio in those videos. This excluded audio showing the following. Video 972, guards extracted a skinny, wide-eyed Allen with blood on his forehead. Allen screamed for his dad, asking guards to hold his hands, and yelled, "Roger, Marvin, wait for it." Video 980, April 13th, guards offered Allen to cuff up, naked and confused. He clutched the sink and shook. When officers entered, Allen begged to be put on an airplane and told them not to believe his last confession. Video 1002, April 17th, while being transported to see Dr. Walla, another inmate yelled, "Kill yourself, Richard Allen." Video 1007, April 17th, during transport to a forced injection, Allen screamed, spoke incoherently, asked for his mummy and daddy, rambled about suicide and time travel, and within 7 minutes claimed to be both the stupidest and smartest person ever, and repeated, "Wait for it." A guard told him the games are over and commented on the feces on him. Allen responded tangentially, "Rocky Balboa is my favorite actor. Clap on, clap off." A guard noted the feces has been on him for a while. Video 1026, April 21st. During a haircut, Allen mostly stared into space, confused, and he responded, "Leave the top," when asked if he wanted his face shaved. Video 10152, April 28th. During a shower transport, Allen spoke incoherently, repeatedly saying, "There is God," or "There is a God. Please don't do this. Make it painless." With feces on his face, he asked to be euthanized and whether his wife was present. He said he was King Michael and claimed he had started World War III and tried to save his family and Donald Trump, sang hymns, quoted scripture, and asked to be cryogenically frozen. Video 1201, June 20th. Guards carried a catatonic, drooling Allen to the infirmary. The medical professional discussed with Alan his cholesterol and blood pressure rather than his non-responsiveness and involuntary jerking. Alan stared blankly when asked the date or the season. Alan asked the court to watch all these videos with the audio or the sound. Also, the jury did not hear Alan the morning he started confessing tell his family in 3 intertwined calls that he was confused and losing his mind. The first call at 3:12 a.m. on April 3rd, Alan told his dad he was losing his mind and he was uncertain how much longer he was going to be lucid. Alan said, "You guys know I would never do something like I've been accused of." Alan felt he had been mentally tortured, like he's in Guantanamo Bay, and that there were drugs in his coffee and Kool-Aid. In the call the jury heard at 5:14 a.m., Alan told his wife for the first time he thinks he killed Abby and Libby, and evidently, I did it. Alan could not remember what he told his dad in the earlier call 2 hours early at 3:12 a.m. Then in a third call, a few hours later at 8:45 a.m., a panicked Alan told his wife he was not sure if his original call to her was a dream. He said he was not drinking the water or coffee and questioned whether the attorneys were coming to visit him or whether the attorneys who were coming to visit him were even his attorneys. The jury only heard that second call with the confession, along with Trooper Harshman's opinion that Alan showed no indication he was under duress or stress when he made that admission. Is that clear enough for everybody? Are you seeing the picture here? The jury never heard that Alan could not have walked the girls across the creek to kill them after seeing a van driving down a road, as he confessed. The state had video showing that Weber's van arriving home 25 minutes after the pause in Libby's phone's movement, and nearly 15 minutes after it stopped moving altogether. Specifically, security camera footage from Weber's neighbors showed Weber arriving home around 2:45 p.m. And the state also had a report from the FBI which confirmed that Weber's cell phone arrived home around 2:50 p.m. The jury also never heard that Alan confessed to details that the real killer would know were wrong, including that Alan said he shot the girls. The judge prohibited Alan's expert, Dr. Gracian, from identifying Alan's signs of being in a state of delirium and hallmarks of false memory. One such hallmark was the facts that Alan got wrong, that he shot the girls. The jury never heard that Alan from the beginning, the jury never heard from Alan that from the beginning, many investigators believed and investigated the girls' murders as part of a Norse pagan ritual, and that the usual and complex scene had textbook features of such ritual. There was always a discussion among law enforcement that this may have been a ritualistic murder, and that the sticks were an attempt at replicating Nordic runes. Also, many officers believed the scene was too complex for just one person to be involved. Yeah, that was scrubbed from the trial and from the jury as well. In fact, within the first week, the Carroll County Sheriff enlisted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to evaluate whether the sticks related to pagan rituals. After examining the evidence, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit declined to exclude pagan ritual as a plausible explanation for the murder scene. Quoting, "It remains possible a new believer or a rogue believer in Odonism was involved in this case." That's the FBI. A Purdue professor was also consulted by law enforcement on whether the sticks were runically inspired. He found it quite plausible that the markings at the scene constitute an instruction inspired by Norse runes or modern recreations thereof. Law enforcement also consulted with an undercover Indiana State Police trooper regarding the sticks and the blood stain on the tree. The officer was very familiar with Norse pagan symbols through his covert intelligence. He was also an expert on the Vinlanders and also directing all of the informants from the motorcycle gangs, the meth trafficking world, and the Vinlander Social Club itself. And he agreed that the blood on the tree resembled a pagan Fehu rune. He also found similarities between the stick configurations on the girls and pagan bind runes. That's the Indiana State's police own undercover trooper and informant handler. Once Allen was charged with the murders, the defense team consulted a nationally recognized expert. I should say this, the nationally recognized expert, okay, on ritual crime scenes. And that's Dr. Dawn Perlmutter, who found 7 distinct features of a Norse pagan ritual or something akin to that, including location. She explained that Norse pagan rituals or Norse pagans follow a Norse pantheon of gods like Thor and Odin, and that they have nature-based ideology, where events and rituals are conducted outdoors in wooded areas near bodies of water. This murder occurred outdoors in a clearing near a body of water, the creek, the Deer Creek, to be specifically intentional in reference to pagan beliefs. Remember all of the Easter eggs that the family and locals dropped about sacrificing a deer and Deer Creek and deer over these years from the locals and the family? Yeah. Date. Norse pagan rituals often occur on Norse holidays or events. The Nordic holiday Valisblot, which honors Odin's son Vali, begins at sundown on February 13th. You know, when the cemetery party started at Ron Logan's, and continues until February 14th. Sorry, I got that wrong. February 12th at sundown, when the cemetery party started at Logan's. And you know what they left out of here? They left out of here another holiday. I can't recall it. I don't know if anyone in the chat can recall. What's the name of that other holiday that coincides with this? That's also Witchy Poo, Wiccan, Norse pagan. It's not just Valis Blot. It's also what is it called? It's slipping my memory. There's so much to recall here. Anyhow, we'll move on. The means used, or the murder weapon. Ritual killings often involve a ceremonial knife. Okay? Here, the girls were killed with a knife that made an unusual scalloped mark. Now, I wonder, where's the murder weapon? Was the murder weapon a handcrafted ceremonial knife? Thank you, Nancy. Lupercalia. I knew, you see, we got Nancy Drew in here. I keep her around as my backup. Lupercalia. It's not only Valisblot, it's Lupercalia. Where's the murder weapon? Where is our ceremonial knife, or where's the knife that killed Abby and Libby? What would be, here's another question for you guys. What would be done with a ceremonial knife that had been used in a human sacrifice by adherents of this sort of philosophy? Ritualistic crimes usually invoke symbolism at the scene. And with Norse pagans, the symbolism would include arranging natural objects in a specific way, specifically sticks, to make the runes. Right? It would also include blooding the runes and bloodletting, I should add. Also, typically would include the consuming of living blood. That's right. These practices are integral to the magical thinking involved in Norse pagan rituals. Specifically, the formation of runes itself is a magical component, the blooding of the runes, the taking of the life, the use of a ceremonial knife, the drinking of the blood, and the staging of the bodies. Every single element in that involves magical thinking. Here, the stick arrangements on the bodies showed intentional symbolism. It's difficult to explain the sticks as hiding the body. They're absolutely not working that way. They're not functioning that way. The stick arrangements on arrangement on Abby mirrored the Norse rune Gabo, and the intentionally placed stick formation on Liberty looked exactly like a Nordic bind rune. Remember, Nordic bind runes have a personal meaning to the creator of each rune. Ritual sacrifices often involve blood loss or letting and torture. The girls' throats were cut. They suffered a prolonged death and blood loss, which is indicative of a sacrificial offering or initiation type of activity. In rituals, the sacrifice will be displayed or arranged at the scene in a manner that is significant to the group, which I call a tableau. And an upside down hanging body is an important element of Norse paganism. Odin hung from a tree for 9 days before discovering runes. As a matter of fact, Abby's positioning is the classic image of Odin depicting himself as one leg being bent behind the other, also known in the tarot as the hanged man. Remember, the tarot or the hanged man comes from Odin, or the image of Odin hanging. Remember that Libby is posed also coincidentally in the tarot configuration of the magician, with the tree functioning as the wand. And I've shown that to you many times. So there's a weird nexus here of tarot symbolism or witchcraft symbolism or pagan symbolism or Wiccan symbolism combined with Norse pagan ritual or Odinist symbolism. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at some intersection of occult or Wiccan or witchcraft type of beliefs and sigils, some sort of weird combination of sigils and runes, or tarot and Odinist symbolism? What are we looking at? Finally, a ritual sacrifice would involve an atypical or symbolic blood pattern in blood. Here, the blood pattern on the tree, the F tree, appeared very similar to a Norse pagan Fehu rune. And remember, there's footage out there all over the internet of these practitioners of Norse paganism blooding the trees, okay? Or painting a tree with a symbol personal to them or the group. Matter of fact, there's also footage of one of our POIs doing this very same act. The jury never heard about how law enforcement totally bungled the investigation into ritual killing or suspects connected to Norse paganism, and that's putting it kindly, because was it a bungle or was it a conspiracy to cover up? ISP disregarded Brad Holder, the father of Abby Williams' boyfriend, and Holder's friend, Patrick Westfall, as promising alternative suspects because they lost, quote unquote, evidence, meaning destroyed evidence, mishandled evidence, and conducted a, quote unquote, poor investigation. Like I said, these terms, they could be taken two ways. Was it an innocent mistake or was it corruption? Oh, was it lost or was it destroyed intentionally? After examining the scene, several officers believed the scene was too complex for just one person to be involved. When the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI evaluated the murder scene, it found noteworthy that Abby was clothed. Allowing Abby to dress ahead of time suggests that the suspect felt differently towards her, including a possibly heightened level of guilt or regret, at least compared to Liberty. Law enforcement explored a group of Norse pagans directly connected to Abby. In the weeks leading up to the murders, Abby had been talking with a boy, Logan Holder, and meeting up with him a few times. She kept this relationship secret from her family. On the day she was murdered, she invited Logan Holder to meet her at the trails, just like Keegan Kline invited Liberty German to meet Anthony Schatz at the trails. Logan Holder was supposed to rendezvous with Abby at the trails. Keegan Kline or Anthony Schatz was supposed to rendezvous with Libby at the trails. Both girls were intending to rendezvous with each of these boys, they thought, at the trails on that day at that time. That's why they asked to go to the trails. Despite the story, the cover story, it was an unseasonably warm day. They just wanted to go have fun and walk the trails and take pictures. No, they were both going there to meet boys. Abby to meet Logan and Libby to meet Anthony Schatz. Fact. And that's coming directly from law enforcement and actually the lead detective over this case. Logan Holder had school allegedly, so he allegedly declined. While law enforcement was searching for the girls, quote unquote, on February 14th, they learned about Logan and Abby's secret relationship, pulled Logan out of class in Logansport and searched his phone. That moment, Logan texted his father, Brad Holder, "She's missing." On February 17th, 2017, law enforcement interviewed both Logan and Brad Holder. By then, law enforcement had already suspected the murder scene involved a pagan ritual. During this interview, Holder reported being involved in a pagan tribe and spending every weekend in Delphi enjoying pagan rituals at Pat Westfall's or with Pat Westfall and 5 or 6 others. Remember I told you, what's my assumption about how many were involved in this crime? 6 to 12. Including women. Let's see. We got a lot of women who are out there that day. And what did Megan Allen confess to doing? To meeting out there with a bunch of guys that day, to getting initiated into a group that day, just like Elvis Fields, and to being gang raped that day, and to sticking a knife in a girl, Abby Williams, to see what it, quote unquote, felt like. But of course, we all forget about Tina Rodell and Megan Allen. These rituals that Westfall, 6 others, including women and Holder, participated in involved animal sacrifice and human bloodletting. Holder admitted knowing about Abby and Logan's relationship, but he denied ever meeting her. Law enforcement recorded Holder's interview, but the Delphi police allegedly recorded over their only copy of Brad Holder's interview before August 2017, permanently deleting it. Only a 1-page narrative remains. According to that narrative, Holder told police he owned a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson firearm, but law enforcement never collected that firearm, nor did they collect his cell phone. On February 19th, 2017, law enforcement interviewed Pat Westfall. They failed to record his interview as well. Only a 5-paragraph narrative remains. According to this narrative, Westfall knew the woods where the girls were murdered very well. He reported knowing the girls but denied ever meeting them. He also reported being a religious leader for local pagans and wore a necklace to the interview representing his efforts to pledge the Vinlanders, a pagan social club. The Vinlanders are not a social club, okay? Go ask the detectives who actually investigated the Vinlanders. They're not a social club. That's semantics. There's no indication law enforcement asked Westfall whether he owned a .40 caliber firearm. Westfall's phone was also not searched at the time. When asked for an alibi, Westfall claimed he was at home with his minor son And Holder told the officers he was at work at Liberty landfill. On April 13th, 2017, officers visited the landfill to investigate and spoke with an employee, Susan Case, who provided a printout showing Holder swiped out of work at 2:45 p.m., which was 30 minutes after the Bridge Guy video. Case invited the officers to review the video to confirm the printout's accuracy, but they declined, nor did they interview any other employees. Unified Command marked Holder as cleared. Tipsters continued to identify Holder as Bridge Guy. Tipsters repeatedly called and reported Holder as a person of interest. Holder posts half-dead women and shows his fascination with symbols out of tree branches, remember, which are directly on the girls' bodies. Sometime around March 2017, Detective Purdy interviewed Holder to get his assistance in connecting the murders to Norse paganism. Because Holder was not a suspect, Purdy did not record or document this interview with a report. In April 12th of 2017, shortly before taking leave, Trooper Winters received a phone call from a tipster, Ryan Boucher, who shared pictures from Holder's social media. Winters found a concerning similarity between the murders and pictures posted on Holder's social media. Those pictures depicted young girls believed to be deceased with sticks placed over their bodies. Winters also noted a similarity between the stick formation on Abby Williams and a bind rune Holder had tattooed or drawn on his hand. It's specifically identical. There's a bind rune on my hand. Basically, I took a Gebu rune and an Isa rune, and I made a bind rune. Holder's social media also featured him holding guns and homemade knives. Winters immediately recommended to his superiors that law enforcement investigate Holder further. They declined to do so, claiming his alibi was cleared by the FBI. Winters also, not satisfied with this, urged ISP to conduct its own investigation. No further action was taken. In 2018, Holder displayed a painting he made of Odin upside down with his right leg tucked behind his left, just like Abby's legs were positioned. Holder's painting also featured a Fehu rune. That's right. Officers continued to find other social media postings from Holder that mimicked the crime scene, but law enforcement declined to interview Holder again. Now, once the state charged Allen, his defense team insisted that Holder and Westfall receive another look. When law enforcement re-examined Holder, he changed his story about knowing Abigail Williams back in 2017, telling law enforcement he never actually met Abby Williams. But in August 2023, he told law enforcement he met Abby Williams once. And during a deposition in 2024, he said he met Abby Williams 2 or 3 times, or 2 times twice. At least one of those encounters occurred shortly before Abby's murder, and it occurred at Westfall's house. Think about that. Is that not a nexus? Brad Holder claims he met Abby Williams at Westfall's house. At the insistence of Allen's counsel, law enforcement finally examined Westfall's alibi on August 17th, 2023. Westfall's son, who was a minor when the murders occurred, could not remember if he was home with his dad when the girls went missing. This time, law enforcement collected Westfall's phone, but he had deleted all the data before turning it over. On April 4th, 2024, Allen's counsel deposed Case, the Liberty Landfill HR officer. In February 2017, Liberty Landfill was operating 2 staggered overlapping shifts, one from 5 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., and a second from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. On the date the girls went missing, Holder was scheduled to work from 5 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., but his badge swiped out during the second shift around 2:45 p.m. Holder did not have the sole custody of his badge. His badge was on a public rack outside the view of cameras and accessible to other employees, including the second shift. There was no lock on the badges, and Holder's name was prominent on his badge. If somebody left when they were supposed to, but somebody else checked the person out an hour or so later, would that be known? The answer, no. When the state moved to exclude any reference to the state's investigation into third parties, the trial court held a hearing on the motion in July of 2024. At the hearing, Holder's wife testified that in 2018, he told her that he had a fight with Westfall because Westfall wanted to move up from animal slaughter to different types of sacrifice. She also testified that Holder claimed that Westfall killed Abby Williams with others and that she needed to keep her mouth shut about it. So how does that sit with you guys? How does that sit with you guys? That's Stacey Juliana's and Mark Lehman's statement of the issues and statement of the case. That's the appeal. Now we're going to be looking at the state's response to that. You can see here the statement of the issues are the same, right? Whether the admission of evidence seized from Allen's home was constitutional fundamental error, whether the trial court properly admitted Allen's confessions, and whether the trial court properly excluded and admitted various pieces of evidence, including whether the trial court properly denied Allen's motion to correct error. Now, here's your state's statement of the case. Compare and contrast this to all that you just heard. On October 28, 2022, the state charged Richard Allen with 2 counts of felony murder. The information was amended on March 22nd to add 2 counts of murder. Following a jury trial between October 14th and November 11th, 2024, the jury found Allen guilty as charged. On December 20th, 2024, the trial court vacated the felony murder convictions and imposed consecutive 65-year sentences on Allen's 2 murder convictions. Allen filed a motion to correct error on January 20th, 2025, to which the state timely responded on February 14th. Oh, what a coincidence. Did you guys realize that that's a coincidence yet? That on February 14th, 2025, February 14th, an anniversary, the trial court denied the motion to correct error, and Allen later filed his notice of appeal on March 11th, 2025. Now, give me a moment and we'll get into this. I got to get some water because my throat's killing me. Statement of the facts according to the state. Now, this is the fantasy according to the state. Okay. So pardon me, but it's not really easy to read all of this with a small writing, but I'll try. My eyes are starting to give out on me. On the afternoon of Monday, February 13, 2017, Allen killed 14-year-old Liberty German and 13-year-old Abby Williams in a remote wooded area north of the Monon High Bridge Trail in Delphi. The Monon High Bridge Trail spans from Freedom Bridge over the Hoosier Heartland Highway on the northwest side and ends in the Monon High Bridge to the southeast. The High Bridge is an abandoned, dilapidated railroad track that spans 852 feet and is 65 high over Deer Creek. Wooden platforms extending out from the sides of the track occur periodically along the bridge. The first platform was approximately 50 feet out from the start of the bridge. The trail dead ends at the far side of the bridge, with both sides slope sharply downhill. Parking to access the trail is located both near Freedom Bridge and further east at a side entrance on County Road 300 North, known as the Mears Entrance. It takes about 10 minutes to walk the trail from bridge to bridge. On February 13th, 2017, Delphi schools were closed and the weather was unseasonably warm. What is up with the spell casting? Unseasonably warm? I have a problem with that phrase. Why that phrase? Delphi High School sophomores Brianne Wilbur and Rayleigh Voorhees, along with Voorhees' two younger sisters, Isabella Voorhees and Anna Spath, arrived at the Monon High Bridge Trail around 12:25 p.m. By 12:43 p.m., the group had walked from Freedom Bridge to High Bridge. Allen, who lived in Delphi and was familiar with the area, also went to the trail that afternoon. Surveillance video allegedly captured Allen's hatchback 2016 Ford Focus driving westbound on County Road 300 North towards Freedom Bridge at 1:27. He parked at the old CPS building and walked to the trail, allegedly. On their return, as they neared Freedom Bridge around 1:30, the group of girls encountered Allen as he walked in the opposite direction toward High Bridge, allegedly. Allen noticed the girls as he walked past them without speaking. Well, that's assuming. Neither Voorhees nor Wilbur saw another man on the trail who looked like him. But did they see another man on the trail? Are other men on the trail? And did they go directly out of there? Were they malingering in the area for the next hour or so, which is what I believe. After reaching High Bridge, Allen walked out to the first platform. Betsy Blair also went to the trail that afternoon to walk. Surveillance video showed her car driving eastbound on County Road 300 North. 1:46 p.m. She also parked at the Mears entrance and entered the trail there. Just before 1:49 p.m., Liberty's older sister, Kelsey, allegedly dropped off Libby and Abby off at the Mears entrance of the trail. Both girls were familiar with the trail. And I made them take my sweaters. I made them take my sweaters because it was unseasonably warm. Liberty German's father, Derek German, planned to pick them up later that afternoon, allegedly. As the two walked towards the High Bridge, allegedly, Liberty German allegedly sent a Snapchat message to Wilbur asking if she was still at High Bridge. Wilbur responded that they had left about 10 minutes earlier. When Betsy Blair reached Highbridge around 2 p.m., she saw a man now known to be Alan, no, now believed to be Alan, standing on the first platform. As Blair circled back to the mirror's entrance, she passed by Libby and Abby as they walked toward Highbridge. Allegedly, it's unknown who the two girls she passed were. I believe it was two of the group that had broken off from the others. Blair did not see anyone else on the trail. Libby and Abby proceeded onto Highbridge, allegedly, and walked toward the southeast end. Libby took a photo of Abby on the bridge at 2:07 p.m., allegedly. Remember, there's no proof of that. There's no indication whatsoever on where that screenshot comes from, on that it actually existed on the phone or not. Okay, that's all extremely questionable. At 2:13 p.m., Libby took a 43-second video from the far end of the bridge showing Abby cautiously walking toward Liberty, and a man initially denominated as Bridge Guy by police, now known to be Alan, following behind her. No proof of that it's Alan. Bridge Guy wore a blue jacket, blue jeans, and a brown hood on his head and sneakers or boots. The audio captured the following. Is he right there? Is he right there? Don't leave me up here. See, this is the path. That be a gun. No. It's untrue. See, this is the path that we go down. There's no path here. We have to go down there. Guys, hi, down the hill. See how it knows it? It says Alan and Alan. All of this is balderdash. Balderdash. The audio exists out there on the internet for you to hear it for yourself. Go do so. Fact check. 7 seconds after the video ended, either Libby or Abby tried unsuccessfully to biometrically unlock the phone. Libby's Apple Health app captured the girls' movements. Alan brought the girls down the steep incline toward Deer Creek, where he later confessed he intended to grape them. Again, allegedly. Between Highbridge and Deer Creek was a single driveway at the end of County Road 625 West that led to the Weber property. Alan saw a van, Brad Weber, driving home from work along that driveway, which scared him and changed his plans. That doesn't work. The timeline doesn't work with Weber arriving home and scaring Alan. So that's also a false. This entire page is garbage. Alan ordered the girls to cross the 100-foot, 4-foot deep creek with rushing water. I don't believe it. I don't know. I don't get that. At some point, Alan ordered the girls to undress, and various pieces of the girls' clothing were found discarded in the creek. Yeah, because Keegan Kline says they threw the clothes in the creek, right? Someone threw the clothing in the creek. Liberty's tie-dye shirt and camisole and one of Liberty's Nike tennis shoes. Abby's jeans and underwear, together but turned inside out. Remember, Ron Logan said there was a drop of blood from his nose on that underwear. Abby's gray hooded sweatshirt and a sock. Alan took the girls north of the steep creek back to the secluded valley area that was difficult to see from the creek. Balderdash, you could see it from the creek. The steep hillside to the north and the Weber property to the south. No, you can see the crime scene directly from Weber's property easily. Libby was naked while Abby was clothed, partially in her own clothing, but wearing Liberty's wet jeans and Liberty's sweatshirt. Abby's tennis shoes were wet and dirty, consistent with the creek bottom. No, they weren't. We've seen photos of all of that. Here we get to an interesting fantasy tale here. Alan cut both girls' necks with a box cutter. Abby sustained one partial transection of her left exterior jugular vein. Liberty sustained at least 3 separate injuries: a partial transection of her right common carotid artery, a complete transection of both her left common artery and her exterior jugular vein. Alan placed tree branches and sticks on their bodies. Liberty's cell phone registered no movement after 2:32 p.m. At 3:11 p.m., Liberty was not answering phone calls from her father. Okay, what they leave out from there is that Derek was at Wilson Bridge. Okay, here's what they're leaving out. Derek makes a call from Wilson Bridge, where I believe the girls were at some point in time, because I ain't going to let you guys forget that they were at Wilson Bridge. You know what else is at Wilson Bridge at the time that Derek makes the call? A white SUV. Who's in the white SUV at Wilson Bridge? What are they doing? And why is Derek even at Wilson Bridge? Why is he not coming down that highway and entering like everyone else to pick the girls up? What's up with Derek German and the white SUV being at Wilson Bridge when this first phone call is made after we know the girls have already stopped moving? Remember, at this point, the family starts absolutely freaking out, losing their shit, calling every fireman, every policeman, everyone in the entire area. Derek walked to Freedom Bridge, Trailhead, where he encountered Dave McCain coming from the High Bridge side. Hey, who did Betsy Blair say the vehicle she saw was? Oh, yeah, David McCain's vehicle is the one she picked out, right? Betsy Blair picks out David McCain's vehicle out of a photo lineup. Derek encounters David McCain coming from High Bridge. McCain says he had not seen two girls. Derek alerts the family that the girls were not at the trailhead and Liberty was not answering her phone. Family freaks the fuck out, quickly assembles, and starts searching the Monon High Bridge Trail and in Delphi proper. As he left the scene, according to the state, Allen kept off the trail to avoid being seen. What? Wouldn't you be more likely to be seen on the road? About 4 p.m., Sarah Carbaugh saw a man, and here we go with another far reach, now known to be Allen, walking along the north side of County Road 300 North as she was driving eastbound. He was hunched forward with his hands in his pockets, much like on Liberty's video. She noted that he was covered in mud and had fresh blood spatters on his light-colored jeans. Well, okay, where's the blood or mud in his car? Around 5 p.m., law enforcement and Abby Williams' mother were notified that the girls were missing. Oh, so what happened between 2 and 5 then? Okay, so 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Law enforcement's notified. Search teams scoured the trail and the areas near the High Bridge until 2 a.m. when the search was called off for the night. Wait, I thought the search was called off for the night at 12 p.m. or 12 a.m., midnight. Isn't 2 a.m. when we hear the blood-curdling screams? That law enforcement, who's still out there, refused to investigate because they're busy. The very place you have 2 missing girls and there's frantically searching for these girls. At 2 a.m., there's blood-curdling screams the moment that now they're saying that the search is called off at 2 a.m.? What? Law enforcement also checked with Brad Weber, who allowed a deputy to look around his property for the girls. So what happens between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m.? The search resumed the next morning, February 14th. What time? Was it 4:33 a.m.? Yeah, because you guys remember the footage from the news channel, because here's a weird thing. Look at the footage from the news channel live that morning on February 14th. You will notice the news channel is broadcasting at either 4:32 or 4:33 a.m., which is exactly the exact minute that Libby's phone starts connecting with the tower as if it's powered on and receives the flood of incoming calls and messages. So somehow at 4:30 a.m., you've got all these guys out there searching, even though it's been called off at 2 a.m., right? "4:30 a.m., you've got the news cameras out there with a whole bunch of searchers, including Adam Bridges' older brother and Eric Williams. They broadcast live with all the volunteer fire department searchers and all these at 4:32 or 4:33 a.m. at the same moment that Abby's phone is connecting finally after it's been out of commission. Okay, I'm sorry, Libby's phone after it's been out of commission. Did someone go turn that phone on at 4:30 a.m. when all those guys are out there? You know what? I have a feeling, okay, I bet you someone turns that phone on or takes it out of a Faraday bag the minute they get out there at 4:30 a.m. They pull the phone out the bag or they turn it on or whatever, stick it under her body. All the fucking firemen, all this shit, they're on the trails. The cameras light up. It's 4:32, 4:33 a.m. You know, you see what I mean about this timeline? So 2 a.m. Now they're saying the search is called off. Simultaneously, you hear blood-curdling screams. 2.5 hours later, the phone comes back on. At the same moment, the news crew is pressing broadcast, and you see all of these volunteer fire department searchers and family members out there. 4:30 a.m. And then you have a vacuum, right? An absolute vacuum until 12:15 p.m. or around noon. Searchers along the south side of Deer Creek found some of the girls' clothing tangled in branches on the water. Searchers were directed to the south side of the creek. Access was made by going down a steep hill that ran south of the cemetery on County Road 300 North. The girls' bodies were discovered behind mature trees north of the creek. Didn't David Erskine say that all of that happened around 9:30 or 10 a.m.? No later than 10:30 a.m.? So let's see, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12? Whoo. That's a lot of hours of daylight. They've been out there since 4:30 a.m. if they ever left. Because let's be honest here, at 2 a.m. when the search is called off, and according to this revised timeline, and we hear blood curdling screams, did anyone actually leave at 2 a.m.? Because if they left at 2 a.m., why are they back there 2 hours later? Only the locals know. Blood pooling on the ground, blood transfer patterns, and DNA testing indicated that Liberty German's injuries were inflicted next to a small tree to the west of the girls' bodies. After touching the tree with her bloody hand and or arm, creating an inverted L shape in blood. Sorry, y'all. That's not a smudge from a hand or an arm. It's 2 or 3 distinct right angles. It's painted on blood with a human finger, which potentially had fingerprints, according to Tobe Lesenby, right? Or are we forgetting everything that's been scrubbed from the internet? But according to the state, Libby leans on the tree, creating this mark, walks toward Abby, sat or kneeled on the ground where she fell unconscious or died in a large pool of blood. Alan then dragged Libby's body by her left arm to her final resting place behind the large tree. Although some of the blood flow on Abby's face suggested her head had been moved or turned, she was injured and died where she was found. Abby was already clothed when the fatal injury was inflicted. Neither girl showed defensive wounds or outward signs of sexual assault. A small amount of DNA was detected in the external genitalia swabs of both Abby and Libby, and from fingernail scrapings of both girls. Male DNA from the genital swabs of Abby and Libby, and from the fingernail swabs of both girls. Fingernail scrapings, male DNA. Genital swabs, male DNA. But it was insufficient DNA for analysis. Libby's cell phone and her other tennis shoe were discovered underneath Abby's body. How odd. The video of their kidnapping was found on the phone. Therefore, it's legit, right? You're telling me that's not planted evidence? It's planted evidence, period. The phone had moisture and condensation on the screen. Look at the photo, you can see that. The moisture condensation is on the screen, not on the phone or the headphone jack, okay? It had connected on and off from the cell tower all afternoon on the 13th and lost cell tower connection between 5:45 p.m. on the 13th and 4:33 a.m. on the 14th. Okay. Are you guys putting together this scenario? 5:45 p.m. when it loses its connection is when what happens? Guys, come on. I know I got some smart people in the chat. 5:45 p.m., the time period that it lost connection. What happens? Oh, that's right. We have someone handling the phone, right? 5:45, someone's handling the phone. There's that headphone jack being manipulated and a call coming in milliseconds before. 5:45 p.m. Fast forward. 4:33 a.m. What do we have? We have the news footage where the news is going live, and there's this entire large group of people out there, quote unquote, searching. Doesn't it sound like someone is there with the phone, 5:45, the moment it loses connection with the tower and gets the headphone jack plugged in and a phone call comes in? Someone else is out there at 4:33 a.m. when the phone suddenly reconnects with the tower. And at the same moment, we have all these searchers out there, proof of fact, which is given by the news going live at that same moment. Sounds like a human being manipulating the phone at each of those junctures. And don't forget that is sandwiched by the 10:32 p.m. manipulation of the phone. So let's see. We got 5:45 p.m. manipulation of the phone. Loses connection. 10:32 p.m. manipulation of the phone. Right? We got Ron Logan's phone out there. Right? We got 2 a.m. search being called off, blood-curdling screams. We got 4:33 a.m. phone coming back on magically. Searchers, quote unquote, out there in mass being captured the moment that the news crew goes live. Sounds like 5:45, 10:32, 2 a.m., 4:33 a.m. That's a window. That's nearly a 12-hour window. A 12-hour window. What can you accomplish in a 12-hour window? I'll leave it. An unfired Winchester brand .40 caliber cartridge was found in the leaves between the girls' bodies. Later ballistic testing showed that the cartridge had been cycled through Allen Sig Sauer Model P226 .40 caliber handgun. Oh, really? We're taking Melissa Oberg's finding as fact? Okay. Here's another key point. February 14th, 2017. Voorhees, Wilbur, and Blair tell police about seeing a man on the trail or platform the previous afternoon after seeing the bridge guy photograph from Libby's phone that was released to the media. They identified immediately bridge guy as the man they had seen. Okay, so all of our witnesses the next day come forward and say, I've seen that guy yesterday, right before you say these girls went missing. Carbaugh came forward a few weeks after seeing a picture of bridge guy. So are you telling me every witness comes forward after seeing the bridge guy released? Why did no one identify Allen? On February 16th, Allen reported to the police that he was on the trail on February 13th between 1:30 and 3:30 and walked past a group of 3 girls as he entered the trail near Freedom Bridge and walked to High Bridge. Allen said that he saw no one else on the trail. So Allen sees 3 girls, no one else, no other guys, and no Betsy Blair and no Dave McCain? Allen's report was misfiled under Richard Allen Whiteman and mistakenly marked cleared. Mistakenly marked cleared. Or was he truly cleared? And here we go with the fantasy world. In September 2022, Allen's report was discovered in a box, and law enforcement began investigating him for the first time. No, he was marked cleared, which means he was investigated before. So let's put that into perspective. If he's marked cleared, it means he's already been investigated. It doesn't mean he's being investigated for the first time. October 13th, I've already mentioned that to you. Allen met with Detective Tony Liggett, investigator Steve Mullen. Allen confirmed he walked to High Bridge on February 13th, saw 3 girls, one older, 2 smaller looking ones, or similar looking ones that were probably sisters, as he entered the trailhead. Then went out to the first platform on High Bridge to watch fish. Allen now claimed that he was on the trail earlier, from 12 to 1 or 1:30. He said that he probably was driving his 2016 black Ford Focus. Allen said he did not see anyone else on the trail that day, specifically not Bridge Guy. Allen said he was probably wearing a dark Carhartt jacket with with a hood, blue jeans, and either tennis shoes or work boots. No, he didn't. First of all, Bridge Guy's not wearing a Carhartt jacket. Secondly, he didn't say he's wearing a dark Carhartt jacket. He indicated that he might have still have his cell phone from 2017. When confronted with the picture of Bridge Guy, Allen said, "If that was taken with the girl's phone, then there's no way it could be me." Based on witness information and Allen's statement, a search warrant was obtained to search Allen's home. Yeah, and like I said, that search warrant was likely authored in the days and weeks before, ready to go when they interviewed Allen. Officers recovered Allen's 6-hour model P226 .40 caliber handgun, Blazer .40 caliber ammo, one unfired Winchester brand .40 caliber cartridge in a keepsake box, blue Carhartt jacket with several knives, box cutters, and photos showing Allen on the hybrid in 2016. Allen still owned his 2016 black Ford Focus. Although Allen had 12 other old cell phones in the master bedroom closet, Allen's cell phone from 2017 was not found. Doesn't mean anything. Allen told ISP Lieutenant Jerry Holman more than once during the search, "It's over." Allen gave a second interview on October 26, 2022. Allen said that he did not have his handgun with him at the trail on February 13, 2017, and denied loaning it to anyone else. If he carried it, he would have the handgun in a side holster and a round chambered. Allen had no explanation for how a cartridge cycled through his gun could have ended up at the scene and denied the possibility that any cartridge at the scene could have come from his gun. Allen was arrested. In early November, following the filing of charges, the trial court ordered Allen to be transferred to the DOC for safekeeping due to media and safety concerns. No. Sorry about the auto filter. The auto camera setting is, every time I do a thumbs up, look, it gives me a thumbs up. And every time I move my hands, it gives me party emojis. Okay. In early November, for safekeeping, DOC, coincidentally placed Allen at Westville. The cell had a bed, a toilet, a sink, a slot through the door which his meals were served, and a narrow window for daylight. After Allen complained that scratches in the window made it hard to see, DOC replaced the window. Allen was given showers, 3 per week, out-of-cell recreation 5 times per week, 3 sets of clothing, and weekly laundry service, books and puzzles, an electronic tablet that he could use to communicate with his family, listen to music, download movies, and play games. When his first tablet broke, Allen did not have to pay the usual fee for a replacement tablet. Allen was offered a television for his cell, but declined it. Allen condemned the cell's overhead lights. Allen was granted in-person visits with his wife. No, one. Which you have to go and read the retelling of that visit. Okay, that wasn't a visit with his wife. Okay, that was a brief face-to-face interaction with his wife under the scrutiny of the Odinist guards. Which is generally not permitted for restricted housing convicts. Allen had access to weekly chaplain visits upon request and received regular checks by medical staff. Although shackled while being transported outside of his cell, Allen's shackles were removed during his sessions with Dr. Walla and his meetings with his wife and attorneys, although placed in the same kind of physical environment as convicted offenders in the unit. Allen was treated better. Allen was treated better. They have the audacity to put this in a document. Treated better. And the primary goal was to keep him safe from himself and the general population. The administrative and medical team met to discuss how to make Allen more comfortable. DOC policy restricted periods of solitary confinement to persons with serious mental illness to 30 days. But Allen's initial diagnosis of major depressive disorder and anxiety did not meet the definition of SMI. Well, hold up. That's a conflict from what we've read through all of this entire period of time. Because he entered Westville on constant suicide watch with prior mental health diagnoses, the cell Allen was placed in was the suicide cell with 24-hour video monitoring, and he was observed by suicide companions. Allen met with Dr. Walla daily, usually in a nearby room with metal grate partition between him and otherwise at his cell door. Allen was offered the opportunity to meet with Dr. Walla out of his cell at least once a week. During a session in early November, Dr. Walla advised Allen not to talk about his case with anyone, and she did not ask him questions about it during the sessions. By December 2022, Allen was removed from constant suicide watch and placed on observation. He was observed every 15 minutes, and Allen met with Dr. Walla once a week. Allen found Jesus and accepted God into his heart in late March 2023 and became increasingly concerned with religious matters. In late March and early April, Allen began receiving his legal discovery, and he had a visit with his attorneys on April 3rd or 4th. In early April 2023, corresponding with those events, Jesus, discovery, and attorneys, Allen's mental health quickly deteriorated. Allen started to refuse meals and act out. On April 3rd, he told his wife, "I did it. I killed Abby and Libby." The next day, Dr. Walla upgraded Allen back to constant suicide watch. Correctional officers were assigned to observe Allen, and Dr. Walla met with him every day. See what's being done here? On April 5th, Allen confessed to Dr. Walla and in a written note to the warden that he had killed Libby and Abby. He told Dr. Walla he acted alone and his intentions were sexual in nature. Dr. Walla warned Allen again that it was not in his best interest to talk about his case. 2 days later, on April 7th, Allen said he killed Libby and Abby by himself and that he was just acting like he was crazy. Sure, that's why they're injecting him with Haldol 4 times. April 8th, 9th, and 10th, Allen made statements that he killed the girls and expressed remorse. During the ensuing days, Allen's behavior became increasingly bizarre, including drinking toilet water, smearing feces on himself and in his cell, and eating his own feces. Allen shifted quickly back to normal behavior if he wanted something, or he would behave outrageously to get attention. So again, they're trying to imply that he's faking, which they're going to have to come to terms with. If you're implying and repeatedly stating, even on the state level, coming from the Attorney General's office, that he's faking, then why in the world are you forcibly injecting him with antipsychotics, long-acting Haldol on multiple occasions during this period if you claim that he's faking? I mean, because either he's faking and you're committing medical malpractice and you should all lose your licenses and be sued, or he's genuinely psychotic and being properly treated medically with these injections, and you're not going to be sued for that, but you will get overturned on appeal because the judge admitted confessions that were extracted from him during a period during which he was clearly psychotic. You have to choose one or the other. You can't have it both ways. By April 13th, Allen's behavior was deemed severe enough to warrant medical intervention. The next day, Dr. Martin presented Allen's case to a treatment review committee, which agreed that Allen was exhibiting psychotic symptoms that warranted an involuntary injections of Haldol and antipsychotic medication. Psychosis ebbs and flows. A person can slip in and out of psychosis in a 24-hour period. Allen was administered an injection of short-acting Haldol for 4 days and monitored for side effects. He received long-acting Haldol injections on April 18th, May 18th, and June 16th. Okay, so let's see. That's 7 total Haldol injections, right? Over a period of April, May, and June. So between April, May, and June, he's injected 4, 5, 6, 7 times. 4 times short-acting Haldol, 3 times long-acting Haldol. No, and the long-acting is a 30-day dose. You're injecting him 7 times, 4 24-hour doses, and 3 30-day doses of Haldol, and you're claiming he's not psychotic during April, May, and June? Between April 14th and May 2nd, Alan's psychotic symptoms slowly improved. He continued to confess during that period, during the period we're administering the antipsychotics, including an admission on April 29th, during the month we're still administering antipsychotic Haldol, that he had used a box cutter he stole from CBS to kill Abby Williams and Liberty German. By May 2nd, May 3rd, during the same month, you're still giving him a long-lasting Haldol. He had returned to baseline and no longer exhibited psychosis. Okay, May 2nd and May 3rd, he no longer exhibits psychosis. Go back to the previous slide. May 18th and June 18th, you're still injecting him with 30-day doses. So look, April 18th, May 18th, June 16th, 30-day doses. April 18th, May 18th, 30-day doses, right? June 16th. So why the hell then where is it here? May 2nd and 3rd, he's returning to baseline, no longer exhibited significant psychosis. Then why on May 18th are you giving him a 30-day dose and then again in June? I mean, there's a conflict here. Alan was diagnosed as having suffered a brief psychotic disorder with marked stressors. April 18th, he's injected. May 18th, he's injected. Oh, May 3rd, Alan gave the most detailed confession of the offenses to Dr. Walla. This was the first time he mentioned seeing a van, and that was what scared him and caused him to forego raping the girls. The new piece of information that a van had driven by, which was something only Bridge Guy would know, led investigators back to Brad Weber. Oh, except for the fact that it was all over the internet for years prior to Rick Allen's arrest. And it's still on the internet, even though Gray Hughes started to scrub it from his channel. It's also on Reddit. Weber's work record showed that he had clocked out of the Subaru plant in Lafayette at 2:02 p.m. on February 13th. Weber confirmed he had driven his van to work that day and went straight home, which would have placed the van on the driveway under High Bridge or near High Bridge and the creek shortly after the girls were kidnapped, except for the fact that the FBI and the surveillance video or the security footage from the nearby home show that he comes home about 2:45, 2:50. Alan continued to confess many more times to Dr. Walla, watch companions and family throughout May and June. May and June, let's see, the same months we're giving him 30-day doses of Haldol for his non-psychosis. Even as late as late February 2024. Additional facts will be provided as necessary to the issues. Okay. And that's the state's entire argument there, which is a whole bunch of, yeah, it is what it is because we tell you, because we put all these things together as if they're one thing, and we're saying it's all Allen, even though there's no proof of any of it. Oh, and by the way, all those things that he was psychotic and all the shit that was going on, all that psychosis, the same time we're giving him these 24-hour doses of Haldol and the 3 30-day doses during this whole time period of April, May, June, July. Don't worry, on that whole period, when the very period these confessions are coming, don't worry, he's faking. Sorry. Okay. And to that, the brief response from the appellate team of Richard Allen is saying, the trial court committed reversible error regardless by admitting evidence obtained through an affidavit built on deliberate falsehoods and material omissions. Detective Liggett falsely swore that the witness Carbo gave incriminating description in 2017, and that Allen admitted to wearing matching clothing. Neither was true. He simultaneously, meaning Tony Liggett, simultaneously concealed Blair's eyewitness description, which excluded Allen and his vehicle, withholding from the issuing judge the very evidence ISP had validated in its 2019 press release. This pattern is unmistakable. Every fact undermining Liggett and Holman's theory was omitted, okay, from that affidavit. And every fact supporting Liggett and Holman's theory, however distorted, was included. Strip away the falsehoods and restore the omissions, and probable cause does not exist. It evaporates. Because Allen exhaustively litigated the suppression below, his challenge is preserved for appeal. Secondly, unprecedented confinement. The trial court committed reversible error by admitting confessions the state extracted from a man it broke. Law enforcement interrogation is not required for coercion, contrary to the argument the state tried to put across. Prolonged solitary confinement on a severely mentally ill detainee plainly qualifies, especially where law enforcement, upon learning of the inmate's grave disability, doubles down and starts collecting confessions. The state's attempt to reframe Allen's 13 months of maximum security isolation as routine custody, oh, he was treated better than anyone else, cannot be reconciled with IDOC's own policies, the IPAS litigation, or the unprecedented harshness of Allen's confinement. The state failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Allen's confessions were a product of a rational intellect, right, and given a free will, rather than a product of their, or the state's, deliberate indifference to his mental health. A criminal defendant has a federal and a state constitutional right, or rights, to present a complete defense. And evidentiary rules that exclude critical defense evidence on grounds disconnected from the rule's purpose violate that right. The trial court's rulings on 7 categories of defense evidence violated that right. The state's brief argues at length that evidence against Allen was overwhelming, but the state's case was a paper tiger, and the trial court systematically barred Allen from lighting a match. The jury never saw the sketch that proved that Blair did not see Richard Allen. It never heard the ritual explanation that the state itself once pursued. It never heard the scientific critique of the unreliable methodology that produced the firearms quote-unquote match, and it never heard the evidence implicating 2 named alternative suspects, Brad Holder and Pat Westfall, and law enforcement's failure to investigate them. It never heard the audio of Allen's psychotic episodes in Westville, the book-ended calls and clinical observations that would have impeached his confessions totally, or the unimpeached phone data that contradicted the state's timeline. You know, that's the information from Stacey Eldridge regarding someone else handling that phone on multiple occasions. And as I'm asserting, all the way to 4:33 a.m. in the morning, the very moment those people are out there. Each ruling was reversible error standing alone. Together, they kept Allen from setting the state's case ablaze and denied him the right to a fair trial. Now, compounding these errors, the state knowingly presented false testimony from Brad Weber, and this is about the motion to correct error, about when he arrived home on the day of the murders. Testimony the state's own FBI subject information sheet refuted. And then it exploited this in the closing as an act only the killer would know, when Allen attempted 6 times to correct that falsity. And of course, the state obstructed every attempt, and the judge sustained every objection. So my opinion here, you stack these together, and what do you have? You have Tony Liggett lying and omitting information on the search warrant affidavit. You have Monica Walla and John Gallipo in collusion with Lesenby and Diener, unprecedentedly confining him and extracting confessions from him during his psychosis. And you have Judge Gull and McClellan putting forth an unfair trial and facilitating the lack to present a defense, an unfair trial, and presenting false evidence and testimony. Now you stack that all together, which is McClellan, Gull, Gallipo, Walla, Lesenby, Diener, Holman, and Liggett, and you have the entire railroading of Richard Allen. And that's the summary that all of you need to understand in the way that all of these stack and come together to paint a complete and whole picture. And hopefully that was a good introduction for you to the appeal that's underway in the Delphi murders case in the trial of Richard Allen. Those were the statements of the case, the statements of the issues, and the summary of the entire appeal. If you're interested in further exploring the fine detail and meticulously breaking down every page, issue by issue, in this appeal from both perspectives, I've done so in the previous handful of episodes. This entire series, Delphi, the Appeal, is laid out in comprehensive detail for you so that you can see what's on the table and matter of fact in black and white in this appeal and in this case, and come to your own conclusion. Because we believe the best and most educated perspective of the public is one which comes about through information that the public receives, is able to process, and come to their own conclusions about. So this is all laid out here, putting the facts on the table, as you can review it all in an easy to hear or read format, delivered in a handful of live streams, so that you can inform yourself, become educated, come to your own conclusions. Remember that age-old adage that in order to receive the correct answers, you have to ask the right questions. And that's my entire approach here, is that the right answers will come only after asking the right questions. And hopefully we've assisted you with starting to formulate some of those questions, because making this information available to yourself, informing yourself of this information, taking it in, coming to your own conclusions, will hopefully give you the ability to put a lot of this together in your mind and give your mind, heart, and soul the opportunity to formulate its own questions regarding this entire case. And that's been my objective during my entire tenure here covering the Delphi murders, that you be able to become informed on every aspect of this case, going all the way back to the very beginning, from all sources available, all open source intelligence, meaning screenshots from the community over the years, statements from the family over the years, statements from law enforcement over the years, every single legal document, every single leak, everything, everything, everything. If you're able to consume all publicly available information, you're able to take it in and holistically allow yourself to conceive of all of this information holistically and come to your own and develop your own insights, so that this mystery of the Delphi murders, which, let's be honest here, this was intentionally formulated to be an undecipherable mystery. This is why this case has such an element of mystery. It's literal witchcraft. It's spell casting. It's spell binding. This entire thing was made to mystify you, to draw you in, to completely disorient you with conflicting uh, uh, information and an overwhelming amount of disinformation and misinformation, so that you can never make sense of it. And that's my approach here in this entire channel. If you look at everything going back years, was to lay out for you an entire body of work that makes all of this easily accessible, so that you can take it all in and then perhaps see through the mystery and see what's plainly in front of your face. And this has been a long process. It's an unbelievable amount of information, the Delphi murders. And it was formulated specifically to be so. So it's my hope that all of this collectively will be enough information that in time you can holistically piece it together and come to your own conclusions and understanding about what we're actually looking at here. Because I think we're looking at something beyond what many can imagine. And ultimately, who knows what that is? But I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're new here, please do me a favor and leave comments down below and hit the like, but especially leave your commentary. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to contact me, my contact information is in the link tree or in the About Me section or description of this channel. Please do support me on all my platforms. Now, if you'd like to donate to the channel, look here. I got my Cash App linked up here. I have a Venmo that's in the link tree. I also have subscriptions over at Substack and various ways you can support the channel financially, which we need and love, and I'd appreciate. And otherwise, you can support us. What do you call it? Morally, you can send moral support by participating in the channel, leaving your comments, and generally just discussing with us this entire thing and letting us know what your thoughts are, because it's the community members who have made this what it is today. The community would have never gotten to the place it is today with its understanding, and this case would have never gotten here without it being an entire community effort. So please be a part of the community. And also, you don't have to stay here. I encourage you to go look at every single creator, every single individual involved, every single claim. Take it all in. And hopefully, when you do that, you'll circle on back and come here to where a good resource sits for you. And anyhow, with that being said, I want to thank my chat members here personally, because they're also awesome, and we'll get out of here. So God bless and thank you all. And thank you to Deb731, my main mod here. Thank you so much, Deb. Thank you to Author Claremont. Okay, Mr. Claremont. Mr. Giuseppe Camerado. Thank you to Nancy Drew 101. Thank you to who was it? Monday. Thank you to Rebecca Ann, Matt Payton, Oh Hey Christina, Silenced Woman, also Erica Morris, okay, Texas Lady, Zaddy, Dewey, okay. Thank you to there's a lot of names here. It's a lot to. Whew. Cromley, okay. Pertinent. David Rogers, Nicole Watt. Thank you, Silence Woman, for becoming a member. I missed that. Thank you to Four Pits Across America, Just James, Carol, Brittany Renee 8420. Thank you to Right Side Up, Heavy Metal Rehab, Kate. See who else I missed. Trial Junkie. What's up, Trial Junkie? Shout out, Trial Junkie. Sunflower Lola. Critter Mama. And hey, shout out to Rebecca Ann for the super chat. Rebecca, I'm sorry I didn't say thank you for that earlier. I missed it. I didn't see it. Okay, shout out Rebecca Ann for the super chat. And hey, anyone else I've missed, I apologize for missing. There's thousands of chats here. Boy Mama, Augie, anyone else I missed, shout out to you. You know, Fur Baby Daddy. Okay, and I think I'll leave it at that. You all know what I mean. And shout out Doug Rice. All right, God bless everyone. God bless all our veterans out there. Happy Memorial Day. God bless Libby and Abby. God bless the families. God bless Kathy Allen and Richard Allen and his family and their families. And hug your kids. Hug your wife. Okay, God bless. We'll see you all later.
Thank you. Let's have a good time.
Taken for a trip on a new dimension ship. Taken for a ride over to the other side. Discovered that time's been forgotten like a song that they never played on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. I can't relate to where I am. People just don't give a damn. I'll find a way, make a break, figure out what it takes while traveling at the speed of light. Changes come, they affect their sight. Now it's been 7 years, almost there. The planet nears, taken for a trip on a new dimension ship. Taken for taken for a ride over to the other side. But discovered that time's been forgotten like a song that they never played on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long. They never played it on the radio too long.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Doug Wright.